Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Alison's existence. Alison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Alison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Alison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Alison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Alison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Alison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Alison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Alison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Alison to take evening classes. At age 18, Alison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Alison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Alison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Alison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Alison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Alison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Alison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Alison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Alison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Alison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Alison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Alison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Catchy Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the two front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Giorano Caci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Anno landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that 2 men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Freeman was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to parents Troy and Jennifer Freeman. Alongside his brother Blake, Stephen enjoyed a happy, healthy childhood free of problems with his parents or society. As a friendly, responsive person, he built strong relationships with many friends who often described him as exceptionally calm. Growing up in Griffin, Stephen attended Spalding High School and later Gordon State College. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, is known for her cheerful, humorous, and friendly personality. Mary expressed her creativity through performing mini-plays for family and neighbors. In their senior years, Mary and Stephen fell deeply in love and remained inseparable. Shared interests brought the couple closer together as they often spent time in nature, enjoying activities such as hiking, fishing, and hunting. After publishing their relationship on Facebook in 2012, Stephen frequently posted photos with Mary. Both families were pleased with the young couple's relationship. Mary's family adored Stephen, and his parents welcomed Mary as a second daughter. Upon finishing school, Stephen and Mary moved in together. Stephen secured a job at Drain, Gutters, and Roofing Inc. as a plumber, while Mary worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School. She also worked part-time at a local gun store. In the summer of 2018, Stephen and his girlfriend Mary had been living together for 7 years. On August 1, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a panicked state. She claimed she had unknowingly shot her boyfriend with a Glock 43 firearm, thinking it was unloaded. When paramedics and police arrived at their home on Sunnybrook Drive, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away by law enforcement officers, who examined Stephen and provided first aid. Despite his severe chest wound, Stephen was still breathing when paramedics arrived. Stephen, 23, was quickly taken to Spalding Regional Hospital, but his condition worsened, and his heart stopped just before midnight. Mary, still reeling from the incident, was required to give a statement at the police station. During questioning, she reiterated her claim that the shooting was an accident. Mary explained that her home had always had firearms, and her boyfriend Stephen would leave a pistol on the nightstand at night for protection. This was because they lived outside the city. On the evening in question, Mary claimed she had simply intended to hand Stephen the pistol, and it accidentally went off. She had no knowledge the gun was loaded at the time. Mary emphasized that Stephen was the love of her life and she would never intentionally harm him. When investigators examined the scene, they found evidence suggesting the act might have been planned in advance. In the kitchen, signs of a struggle were visible, with food and dishes scattered around. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found it hard to believe Mary's story and decided to further investigate the evidence. Mary was brought in for another interrogation. This time, the investigators applied pressure. They raised their voices, doubted her account, and demanded honesty. The tactic worked, and she confessed to shooting her boyfriend in a fit of anger. She revealed that they had a severe argument that night, and she wanted to leave him. Investigators recorded the conversation, capturing her admission of guilt and essentially resolving the case with a candid confession. A technical issue occurred, resulting in the loss of most of the recording, with only fragments of interference and indistinct noises remaining. The reason for this technical failure was unknown, and it was surprising that no one had made a backup copy of such crucial evidence. Further investigation led to the discovery that the pistol was not capable of accidental discharge, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. This meant that the gun had to be intentionally pointed at Stephen for the bullet to hit him. Detectives also expressed skepticism about Mary's behavior and questioned whether her distress was genuine or false. They continued to collect evidence, slowly piecing together the case. However, Mary's own words raised another important question about the accident. Investigations revealed that she had previously worked at a gun store, where employees received extensive training on handling firearms before starting work. This strongly suggested that Mary should have known how to safely handle a pistol and that an accident was highly unlikely. The investigation into the accident revealed inconsistencies with the initial testimony. Mary gave multiple conflicting statements during the investigation. Initially, she said Stephen's death was an accident, claiming she was handing him the pistol directly. Then, she accidentally opened fire. However, during further questioning, Mary let slip that she had actually tossed the pistol to Stephen at his request, resulting in the accidental discharge. These contradictory statements raised suspicions, as Mary's story kept changing. As a result, she was detained at the Spalding County Jail and charged with felony malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm. Lieutenant Wilson strongly disputed Mary's claim that the incident was an accident and sought to prove that she had deliberately planned the act. A recent discovery shed light on the case. A small amount of cooking grease was found on the pistol's slide. This indicated that the pistol had been handled recently, with the magazine possibly being emptied, reloaded, and placed back on a shelf. Mary defended herself by explaining that she was preparing dinner for Stephen on the evening in question, which would explain the grease found on the slide. Despite further investigation, speaking with Mary and Stephen's relatives and friends did not shed much light on the situation. It was revealed that the couple, who began dating as teenagers, had a complex and on-again, off-again relationship, marked by numerous breakups and reconciliations. The relationship between Mary and Stephen was tumultuous and often marked by heated arguments. Mary would escalate, screaming at Stephen, physically lashing out at him, and prompting him to leave the house for the night to stay with friends. In an attempt to cope with the emotions of the moment, Stephen would usually turn off his phone, while Mary would continue calling and texting him. Mary's behavior went beyond just verbal arguments. She frequently tried to control Stephen's actions, leading to him feeling frustrated and helpless. Furthermore, Stephen confided in his friends about instances where Mary would pull out a pistol during fights, threatening to harm either herself or Stephen. Despite the severity of these incidents, Stephen chose not to report them to the police out of concern that Mary would face jail time. Stephen's friend, Thomas Skinner, revealed some critical information during an interrogation. He stated that just 2 days before the tragic incident, Stephen and Mary had exchanged affectionate messages, wishing each other a good day. However, the situation took a drastic turn the following day, when Stephen told his mother he didn't want to come home because of the unbearable situation. He said he would rather stay with Thomas. On the night of August 1, 2018, when Stephen failed to come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages, desperately pleading with him to return. That evening, Mary prepared dinner, expecting boyfriend Stephen to return home. She found out from Stephen's mother that he was at his friend Thomas's place. Mary drove to pick him up and encountered them on the road. She rolled down her window and told Stephen that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen agreed to come home, but the evening ended in a tragic incident. A year after Stephen's death, Mary went on trial in June 2019. Before the trial, the prosecution offered Mary a deal: life in prison with the chance of parole if she admitted to the crime. Despite this opportunity, Mary refused the offer and maintained her innocence. During the initial court hearings, Mary vigorously defended herself. She insisted that the incident was an accident and that she had no intention of harming Stephen, emphasizing her deep love for him. She also made a shocking accusation, claiming that Stephen had a history of abusing her. According to her, he physically assaulted her on 2 occasions and even forced himself on her. On the day of the tragic incident, Stephen allegedly attacked her, forcing her to defend herself. It became clear that the couple's relationship had been deteriorating for quite some time. Friends and relatives noted that Mary had been furious with Stephen for frequently ignoring her messages and calls. Mary's behavior had become more and more demanding in the days before the incident, and she had become very insistent on getting her way. On the night of the shooting, Stephen returned home, but he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him. This rejection seemingly pushed her over the edge, and she fired at him. Prosecutor Kate Leonard presented evidence in court that suggested Mary shot Stephen in anger when Stephen finally came home, but he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him. Key evidence included grease found on the pistol, as well as a sheet from the mattress where Stephen was found bleeding. Forensic analysis of blood stains on the bed sheets showed that Stephen did not attack or approach Mary at the time of the shooting. Instead, the evidence suggested he was calmly sitting on the bed, motionless. If he had been moving, the blood stains would have been more widespread, but they were confined to one area of the sheet. Mary faced the possibility of life imprisonment once again. She made the risky decision to testify truthfully in court, her voice filled with emotion and tears in her eyes. In front of the judge, she described Stephen as a controlling and violent man. She presented evidence to back up her claim, saying she shot Stephen in self-defense after an argument on the night of the incident. Mary sadly shared many stories from her life with Stephen. He physically and emotionally abused her. She claimed that Stephen frequently hit her violently and made threats over minor infractions or disobedience. She was constantly manipulated and controlled. Stephen monitored everything she did, from her spending to her friendships and even what she ate. His extreme possessiveness left Mary extremely anxious and depressed. Her feelings of love and fear for Stephen made her hesitant to report his behavior to the authorities. However, reviewing text messages from Mary's old phone raised questions about who was the actual abuser and manipulator in the relationship. These messages, spanning 18 months, showed Stephen's aggression, but they also exposed Mary's infidelity. While some of the messages contained harsh language and threats from Stephen, they were often in response to his own pain and anger caused by Mary's infidelity. Mary said that Stephen had previously forced himself on her twice. She feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018, which led her to defend herself. To support Mary's statement, the defense presented expert testimony and called close relatives, including her sister Sarah Higdon. Mary's sister described seeing bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the incident and regretted not photographing them or taking action at the time. During her testimony, Mary expressed her emotions as she recounted the incident of that night. She had decided to end her relationship with Stephen and told him to leave, but he became angry and attacked her. In response, Mary grabbed a pistol from her nightstand and it accidentally discharged. The prosecution and defense presented conflicting perspectives, the prosecution portraying Stephen as the victim and the defense claiming Mary acted in self-defense. Stephen's friends attempted to portray him positively, describing him as a loyal and hardworking person. They portrayed Mary as a possessive girlfriend who controlled Stephen and threatened to harm herself whenever he tried to leave the relationship. According to Thomas, one of Stephen's closest friends, Mary's behavior had become more and more damaging and unacceptable over time. He claimed she once even pointed a pistol at her head during an argument, implying that her actions were to maintain control over Stephen. Alicia Varela, Stephen's co-worker, testified that Mary would frequently call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Leonard pointed out. Mary describes their relationship as deteriorating and claimed the shooting was in self-defense, but she failed to mention the specific moment when she pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Leonard questioned Mary's claims, noting that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned Stephen's alleged abuse. To recreate the incident of the shooting, prosecutor Kate held the pistol and described the scene. According to Kate, Stephen came home, and the couple argued over dinner. When Stephen refused to eat, Mary, in a rage, threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen then went to the bedroom to avoid further conflict, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, instead of calming down, Mary called out to Stephen twice without receiving a response. She then entered the bedroom, where she shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Leonard concluded her arguments by asking the jury to consider the inconsistencies in Mary's story, which had changed significantly after repeated interrogations. The prosecution presented additional evidence to counter Mary's claims. A forensic examination revealed that Stephen was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, contradicting Mary's assertion that he was attacking her. Mary claimed the gun was normally kept unloaded in the house, but detectives suspected it may have been loaded in advance on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. The evidence supporting this theory included grease marks found not only on the slide of the pistol but also inside it, raising questions about whether Mary had loaded the pistol prior to the incident. Everyone who knew Stephen testified that he was not an aggressive person. However, prosecutors noted that Mary repeatedly changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which she attributed to her fear. Mary had earlier rejected a plea deal that could have saved her from a death penalty sentence, and the long wait for the verdict was unbearable for her. The jury was persuaded by the arguments presented by jurors Victor and Chris. After hearing from all witnesses and Mary herself, the jury was tasked with making a decision. After careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision: Mary Catherine Higdon was not guilty on all charges. The jury's decision shocked and outraged many in the courtroom, especially Jennifer Freeman, Stephen's mother, who struggled to contain her anger at the jury as she watched the woman who took her son's life walk free. They found it difficult to comprehend how the jurors could reach such a verdict. Following her acquittal, Mary returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has chosen to maintain a low profile, avoiding the public eye and media attention. Her social media presence is minimal, with her Instagram profile set to private. Little is known about Mary's current life, and it is assumed that she has moved on from her difficult past to live a quiet and private life. Stephen's mother paid a heartfelt tribute to her son on social media. In his outgoing spirit, he made friends with everyone he met, but those who shared his passion for hunting and fishing held a special place in his heart. His kind nature, warm smile, and charm left a lasting impression on those around him. Stephen's way of expressing love was unique and special. He made you feel like you were the only person in the world, bringing laughter and joy to those who spent time with him. His warm smile and welcoming hugs made everyone feel loved and appreciated. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Elizabeth Arellano. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas, USA. She grew up with two close sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna. Her biological father left and Elizabeth was very young and never contacted or cared for her. Later, her mother, Juanita, remarried Fidel. He adopted Elizabeth and her sisters, treating them as his own children. Elizabeth has a very good relationship with her stepfather, who always supports and helps her in everything. Elizabeth was a hardworking student and dreamed of becoming a doctor in the future. During high school, Elizabeth met and fell in love with Rudolph Ariano, a boy nearly 8 years younger than her. Although Elizabeth's parents felt a bit uneasy about this age difference, they did not interfere in their daughter's relationship because they saw Rudolph as a serious and trustworthy man. Shortly after graduating from high school at the age of 16, Elizabeth married Rudolph. They had 4 children together, 3 boys and 1 girl. However, Elizabeth did not want to be just a housewife. Remembering her childhood dream, she decided to pursue a career in medicine. After graduating from medical school, Elizabeth worked as a paramedic and planned to continue her studies to become a doctor. She was kind, raised in a Christian family. She regularly took her children to church and taught them to love and care for those around them. Her family and friends commented that she was sensitive and always ready to help others. On the surface, her marriage to Rudolph seemed happy and stable. However, after 13 years of marriage, their relationship began to have serious problems. Previously, Rudolph had been jealous and tried to control his wife in everything. Over time, his behavior became increasingly unacceptable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth decided to leave home with her children and move in with her parents after witnessing her husband's jealousy once again. Although Rudolph tried to reconcile, Elizabeth was tired of his hot temper. She also did not want her children to witness the constant quarrels between their parents. Therefore, she boldly filed for divorce. Just a few days after Elizabeth left with her children and filed for divorce, she suddenly disappeared under mysterious circumstances. According to friends and family, Elizabeth had previously appeared very cheerful. To relieve stress from family problems and the divorce process, she decided to go out with her colleagues to a local club after work. On Friday night, April 15, 2016, Elizabeth, then 28 years old, went out with friends at a club. There, she danced and had fun but did not drink alcohol because she had driven there and planned to drive herself home. After midnight, around the early morning of April 16th, Elizabeth drove home. After parking her car, she called a friend who had gone out with her to let her know that she had arrived safely. However, after hanging up the phone, Elizabeth mysteriously disappeared without entering the house. The next morning, Juanita, Elizabeth's mother, was very worried when she discovered that her daughter was not home. Although she knew that Elizabeth had planned to spend the evening with her friends, her daughter should have returned home a long time ago. Elizabeth was not in the habit of going out without notice, and her car was still parked outside the house, indicating that she had returned from the club. When Juanita approached the car, she found that it was unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition, and Elizabeth's wallet and cell phone were on the seat. Leaving personal belongings in the car open like that was completely out of her daughter's habit, which made Juanita think that something bad had happened. Without hesitation, she immediately called the police to report her daughter as missing. The police believed that they could quickly solve Elizabeth's missing person case. They still hoped that she was alive because they did not find any blood or signs of a struggle in the car. However, the investigation was more complicated than expected. The first step was to reconstruct Elizabeth's itinerary on the night of her disappearance in detail to identify and interview witnesses. Police interviewed Elizabeth's friends and co-workers who had seen her that night. They confirmed the time Elizabeth left and said she had called back to say she had arrived home safely. Elizabeth's phone contained multiple calls and text messages from her ex-husband, Rudolph, that night, but she did not answer. When police questioned Rudolph, he said Elizabeth had promised to bring the children to his house that weekend. However, she had not contacted him since then, and he thought she had changed her mind. There were still some unclear points about Rudolph's alibi. Rudolph said he had been at a local bar that night with a friend, then went home to sleep around midnight. Several people at the bar confirmed seeing he there, but no one knew for sure where he went after he left. Rudolph claimed to have returned home. But since he lived alone, no one could corroborate this. So the police have not ruled him out as a suspect. Notably, Rudolph did not appear to be upset or worried. Although he and Elizabeth were in the process of divorcing after many years of marriage and having children, it was strange that her disappearance did not seem to affect him. A strange incident occurred the night Elizabeth went missing. A fisherman called the police to report what he had witnessed. He said that around 4:30 a.m., while fishing on a highway bridge, he saw a car stop. The driver pulled out a large object that looked like a person and threw it into the water. The object appeared to have a heavy object tied to it. Due to the distance and the darkness, the fisherman could not clearly see the details or the license plate. The strong wind on the bridge also prevented him from hearing anything. Later, another witness was found. This person was walking his dog under the bridge. He did not see the incident on the bridge, but heard a terrible scream. Then he saw a large object fall from the bridge, heard a splash, and then everything went silent. Based on the testimony of the witnesses, the police decided to check the bottom of the pond near the bridge. After several hours of searching, divers discovered a body tied to a large concrete block with a rope around the neck. The body was identified as Elizabeth Ariano, who had gone missing earlier. The discovery of this body was only possible thanks to the testimony of the passerby and the fisherman. Without their information, the body might not have been found or would have been discovered only after a very long time, because the weight of the concrete block prevented the body from floating to the surface. Initially, a hypothesis was put forward that Elizabeth had voluntarily ended her life due to family problems. However, details of how the body was discovered suggest it may have been a murder. However, this theory is not credible because it contradicts two important sources of information. First, an eyewitness reported seeing someone throw Elizabeth into the water. Second, her relatives confirmed that Elizabeth had many future plans and would never do anything to harm her children and parents. Elizabeth was still alive and a piece of concrete was tied around her neck and she was thrown off the bridge. This is supported by the results of the forensic examination, which showed that she had suffocated, and by the testimony of a man who heard her screams of despair as she was thrown off the bridge. However, many questions remain unanswered about this murder. Who were the perpetrators, and what was their motive for being so cruel to a mother of many children? Robbery can be ruled out because none of Elizabeth's property was taken. Some theories suggest that the killer may have spotted Elizabeth at the club and secretly followed her home, or that someone was waiting at her home for her return. Her ex-husband, Rudolph, still insisted that he was asleep at his house on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with the crime, however. Investigators were reluctant to rule Rudolph out as a suspect because he had no alibi and his behavior raised more and more questions. At the Elizabeth's funeral, he pretended to be sad. He cried by his ex-wife's coffin and said that he wished he had died instead of her or with her. His sister Elizabeth believed that his words were sincere. Rudolph also actively helped set up a charity fund to organize a farewell ceremony for his wife. However, after the funeral, when he was summoned to take a statement again, his attitude and behavior completely changed, as if nothing serious had happened in his life. After a thorough examination of CCTV footage along Elizabeth's final route, a car identical to Rudolph's was seen leaving her parents' home at around 3 a.m. A neighbor also confirmed seeing the car parked near the victim's home. Notably, the car was later spotted moving towards the bridge where she was thrown. This raised many questions. When the investigation found Rudolph's cell phone data from the night of the incident, more questions were raised. That night, he made several phone calls from different locations, near Elizabeth's workplace, then near her parents' home. He also sent several text messages to Elizabeth, trying to determine when she would be home, but received no response. Apparently, he was following Elizabeth and decided to wait for her at her parents' home. Eventually, with enough evidence gathered, the police arrested Rudolph as the prime suspect and took him to the station for further questioning. A key witness in the case was Elizabeth and Rudolph's eldest son. When shown the rope that had been removed from around his mother's neck, he recognized that he had seen and played with it in his father's backyard. He also remembered that there was a piece of concrete in the yard before the fence was replaced. Similar pieces of concrete were found in the trunk of Rudolph's car. The investigation revealed that Rudolph had waited for Elizabeth at her parents' house and kidnapped her before she entered the house. He forced her into the car, which had rope and concrete in the trunk. He then drove to the bridge to commit the murder. Rudolph Ariano was arrested 10 days after his ex-wife's body was found in the lake. Despite overwhelming evidence and witness testimony against him, Rudolph denied any involvement and insisted that he was home the night of the crime. For this brutal crime, Rudolph faced the death penalty. Then, on the advice of his lawyer, he decided to confess and cooperate with the investigation to reduce his sentence. It was not until January 2019 that Rudolph officially pleaded guilty in court and detailed the kidnapping and murder of his ex-wife and was the mother of their 4 children. Juanita, who was present in court to hear the testimony, fainted. Alessandra and Giovanna, the victim's sisters, called their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph admitted to the murder but showed no remorse or guilt. He spoke coldly about his actions, without apologizing or explaining his reasons. The court sentenced Rudolph to life in prison without parole. Elizabeth's family said the sentence was too light, but they decided to forgive Rudolph so as not to live in hatred. Currently, Elizabeth's parents and sister are taking care of and raising her children. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Channing Starbuck. Channing Starbuck, a 42-year-old woman, was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana, as the youngest child with 2 older brothers. Her parents eventually divorced and started new families, resulting in additional siblings for Channing. On December 3, 2011, Channing was discovered on the floor of her bedroom, positioned in a suggestive manner. An erotic massager was placed on her stomach, indicating a clear attempt to humiliate her after death. The police immediately suspected foul play due to the numerous bruises and scrapes on her body. A medical examiner later confirmed that some of the injuries were caused by a stun gun, and evidence suggested that her body had been moved. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The detectives assigned to solve the case faced a difficult task. They needed to reconstruct the final hours of Channing's life and identify the perpetrator. Channing, a mother of 5, had been reported missing by her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, a day before her body was found. Clay, 47, had alerted the authorities that he had been unable to contact Channing since December 1 at approximately 3 p.m. Channing sent a text to her daughter, saying she couldn't pick up the kids from school because she wasn't feeling well. She asked them to wait for their father, claiming she had already informed him of the change in plans. However, his phone was turned off, so he didn't know what was going on. The younger siblings, Marshall and Serena, were tired and hungry, so 15-year-old Logan decided to call her older brother Austin for help. She asked him to drive them to their father's house, which was just a couple of blocks away. When they arrived, Austin said he couldn't reach their mother either. He thought maybe she had turned off her phone to rest. Austin put the kids in the car and drove them to their father's house. Clay was surprised to see them but was happy to spend time with his kids. Since the older kids had lived with him after the divorce, and the younger ones had stayed with their mother, Clay decided to enjoy the unexpected visit and didn't contact Shannon. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened with her. Clay expected to see Shannon at the school basketball game that evening, but she didn't show up. The next day, December 2nd, Clay took the kids to school and then went to Shannon's house. The front door was locked, and the blinds were closed. Since he didn't have a spare key, he couldn't get in. Clay sent a message saying that if Shannon didn't show up by 7 p.m., he would contact the police. After waiting until the agreed time, Clay went to the police station to report Shannon Starbuck's disappearance. 2 sheriff's deputies visited her address but found nothing suspicious, so they returned to the station. The officer told Clay to wait one more day. If he still hadn't heard from Shannon after that, he should return to the station. The next day, Clay returned to the police station, and it was then that he discovered he wasn't the only one looking for Shannon. A friend and her mother had also reported being unable to contact her, which was unusual for Shannon. This new information prompted the police to take the case more seriously. It had been 48 hours since Shannon's disappearance, and several people were worried about her. The police visited Shannon's home again. Upon entering the residence, they found no signs of forced entry or robbery. Initially, everything appeared to be in order. However, when they entered Shannon's bedroom, they discovered the disturbing truth. Shannon Starbuck's disappearance was a result of a brutal murder. In her room, investigators found an unmade bed with a blanket nearby, but the sheet was missing and the mattress cover had red stains. Her cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts examined the room for fingerprints, finding 12 latent prints on the massager box and bathroom mirror, while some surfaces had been wiped clean. DNA analysis was conducted on traces found in common areas, and specialists took scrapings from under Shannon's nails, face, and neck. Detectives believed the murder occurred after Shannon got out of the shower, and her body was moved to the bed and then the floor. The missing sheet was found in a washing machine, suggesting the perpetrator tried to eliminate evidence. Clay arrived at Shannon's house by noon to find out what had happened to his ex-wife. However, the scene at her yard was ominous, with yellow tape cordoning off the area, an ambulance, and several police cars parked near the lawn. Clay was the first to be informed of the tragic event. To gather more information about Shannon and her lifestyle, the detectives questioned Clay after he had calmed down. He explained that he and his ex-wife had a morning routine where he would take the younger kids to school and she would pick them up afterwards. However, on December 1st, his car broke down a few blocks from home, disrupting their routine. Clay had texted Shannon to ask her to take the kids to school. It was supposed to warm up around 11 a.m., but when he tried to start the car again, it still wouldn't start. He gave up and went back inside to take a nap. Clay slept for several hours without being disturbed, during which time his cell phone ran out of battery. To support his story, he showed the police his correspondence with his ex-wife, Shannon. Initially, everything seemed to add up. Clay was cooperative, providing his cell phone, DNA, and fingerprints. He also expressed concern for Shannon, explaining that their divorce had made her more vulnerable. When asked for more information, Clay revealed that Shannon had joined a dating site after becoming single. As an attractive woman, she had many admirers. According to Clay, she might have been seeing multiple people at the same time, and one of them might have been responsible for her death. Unfortunately, he didn't have any specific names to share. During the conversation, Clay became emotional and cried, struggling to accept Shannon's death. After recording his statement, the police sent him home. He had to break the news of their mother's death to their children. At the start of the investigation, the case surrounding Shannon Starbuck's demise was gathering momentum. Investigators questioned the Shannon family's neighbors, focusing on every detail, especially reports of unfamiliar people and vehicles in recent weeks. An autopsy revealed severe injuries, including chest trauma consistent with the use of a stun gun, 10 broken ribs, and head and body injuries likely caused by a blunt object. The severity of the injuries made it difficult to determine the exact time of death, but the expert estimated that Shannon's life ended between December 1st and 2. Scratches on her body suggested that she had been moved, and her broken neck bone supported this theory. The medical examiner found evidence of strangulation using a soft object, possibly a hand, towel, or sheet. A breakthrough in the case came from the analysis of body samples, which revealed male DNA. This suggested that the suspect might be one of Shannon's close male acquaintances, including her ex-husband or secret admirers. Clay Starbuck, her ex-husband, has cooperated fully with the investigation, including undergoing a medical examination to check for any injuries or harm. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator might have been injured during the struggle, but Clay showed no signs of injury on his hands. The investigators then examined their sons, 21-year-old Austin and 18-year-old Blake. The only issue that arose was the presence of old cuts on the older son's hands, but these were explained by his job at a window manufacturing plant. During conversations with the sons, some facts were established that would later become clearer. The children knew that after the divorce, their mother had been dating and they disapproved of it. They had seen explicit photos on their mother's laptop, leading them to wonder if she might have been targeted by an online predator. It was clear that the sons loved their mother and were deeply shaken by her death. However, they had disagreed with the changes she had been making in her life. In a subsequent interview, Clay expressed himself more clearly. He blamed Shannon's behavior for his family's problems while he was away on business, especially her frequent encounters with other men. Clay even suspected that Marshall might not be his biological son, but he loved him regardless. Clay believed that after their relationship ended, Shannon started to indulge excessively and not appropriately for her age. He disapproved of her dropping off the kids at his place when she went on dates. By this point, investigators had not only spoken to Clay and the children but also interviewed Shannon's relatives and friends. The detectives developed a more comprehensive understanding of the deceased and her family. Shannon had always dreamed of having a big, loving family. Growing up, she was a kind and modest person who loved to draw and was very good at it, winning many awards. At 20, she met 25-year-old Clay Starbuck in Florida, where she had moved with her family when she was young. Clay was on vacation from Alaska. They were introduced by friends at a party and hit it off right away. That night, Shannon learned a lot about Clay. He had gone to school in Colorado to learn about diesel mechanics and later worked on the Trans-Alaskan pipeline, which paid well. However, he was already married with 2 kids. Despite his complicated past, Shannon wasn't discouraged. She actually saw it as a plus, thinking it gave him valuable experience for their future together. Shannon and Clay got married soon after meeting. As Clay's new wife, she moved in with her husband. At first, she struggled to adjust to her new surroundings and the weather, but she quickly settled in. Shannon's married life wasn't as perfect as she had envisioned. Her husband Clay was often away, leaving her to manage the household by herself. However, her love for him gave her the strength to carry on, knowing that his work shifts would eventually end and he would return to her. In the meantime, she took on the role of mother to his children from his previous marriage and soon gave birth to their own son, Austin, followed by another son, Blake, 3 years later. In 1996, they welcomed a daughter, Logan, who was later diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Shannon accepted her daughter's diagnosis with love and care, becoming her closest companion. The family was later completed with the arrival of another daughter, Serena. Shannon devoted herself to her children's well-being, education, and spiritual growth. She was also known for her cooking, crafts, and other hobbies within their community. However, she was so focused on being a caring mother and a loving wife that she didn't realize her husband was having an affair at work. When she discovered his affair, she felt deeply betrayed and shocked. This led her to file for divorce in 2000, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She still had feelings for her ex-husband, so she moved to Arizona to start fresh and ease the pain of their separation. There, she attempted to start a new relationship, but it didn't work out because she realized she still loved her ex, Clay. Clay was also reaching out to her and asking her to come back, claiming he had changed. Believing him, she gave him another chance. In 2001, they had a son named Marshall, their fifth child. However, instead of strengthening their relationship, Marshall's birth created new tensions. Even when they formally remarried in 2006, their relationship remained strained. 6 months later, the family moved to Deer Park, Washington. Clay's work kept him away, leaving Shannon to care for the children and manage the household. She kept her family entertained by organizing outings and parties at home. However, the frequent time spent apart put a strain on her marriage, creating doubts and mistrust that eventually led to a permanent separation in 2010. Crossing into her 40s, Shannon started to rebuild her life with the hope of finding love again. She was determined not to give up or make the same mistakes as before. Even when her ex-husband Clay suffered a serious injury, Shannon chose not to go back to him. However, she still provided him with support and help. In February 2011, Clay quit his job and moved to Deer Park to be closer to his children and Shannon. Although he hoped Shannon would take him back, she didn't feel the same way. She had finally found freedom and was enjoying it. After Clay's surgery, Austin and Blake moved in with him, enjoying more independence from their mother. Shannon started a new chapter, finding a part-time job and enrolling in a dental assistant course to support her family since Clay stopped paying child support due to illness. The children stayed with Clay on Wednesdays and every other weekend. By summer's end, Shannon completed her certification and was ready for her next goal. Shannon Starbuck had been seeking a fresh start, creating a dating profile in hopes of meeting someone special and leaving her past heartache behind. She regretted spending her best years with a man who didn't appreciate her and was capable of deceit. Tragically, her dreams were cut short one December morning when she became Shannon of a heinous crime. Her funeral, held on December 10, 2011, was attended by a large number of people, a testament to her bright and sincere personality. She was laid to rest at a cemetery in Orlando. The investigation into her death was swift, thanks to public attention. Detectives focused on her ex-husband Clay, verifying his alibi for December 1st. His fingerprints didn't match those at the crime scene, so they checked his story against databases and examined Shannon's phone, laptop, and diary for other potential suspects. Detectives thoroughly examined Shannon's mobile phone, leading them to add several individuals to the list of suspects. These men had been in contact with her through a dating site, raising suspicions about their potential involvement. One suspect, Tom Walker, had arranged a date with Shannon for December 5th, just hours before her death. Their conversations had been candid, and they had exchanged photos. However, when Tom Walker requested that Shannon take a photo using an adult toy, she declined. Notably, her body was later discovered in the exact pose that Tom Walker had mentioned. Within an hour, detectives located Tom Walker, who was shocked not only by the news of Shannon's death but also by being considered a suspect. He promptly provided an explanation for his activities on the day of her death, which was corroborated by his colleagues and surveillance footage. The next individual on the list was John Wilson, who had scheduled a meeting with Shannon on December 1st. An examination of their correspondence revealed. The investigation revealed that the suitor, whose real name was John Kinlawn, had no intention of a serious relationship with Shannon and had used a fake identity. He was married and worked in a different field than he claimed, which explained his secretive behavior. When questioned, Kinlawn had an alibi for the time of the crime, which was corroborated, and he was released after providing a DNA sample. The investigation was back to square one, but a breakthrough came when detectives examined Channon's mobile phone. They discovered that a 911 call had been made from the phone on the morning of December 1st, but it had been deleted from the call log. After retrieving the call, they found it contained only the sounds of sobbing and rustling before abruptly ending. Channon's phone records revealed a failed call and 11 messages sent after her death. GPS data confirmed her phone was at home, where she was killed after dropping her kids at school. The suspect tried to mislead the investigation and was found to be close to the Channon family, even using a nickname for the youngest son. After uncovering this information, Clay's statements were examined more closely. He had a clear motive for killing his ex-wife, as divorce can be difficult for some partners to accept. Additionally, he had the perfect opportunity, knowing her daily routine. As a result, authorities decided to track the suspect's car route again, this time using footage from street surveillance cameras. This is when the officers' suspicions became clearer. It turned out that Clay's car had not broken down. At the same time, results from another analysis arrived, showing that DNA material collected from Channon's body matched the suspect's samples exactly. When Channon returned home, a heated argument broke out, which ultimately led to her death. The unusual position of her body was a deliberate act of vengeance by Clay, who was enraged by her newfound freedom. After the murder, Clay stayed in the house and impersonated Channon in text messages. It became clear that his intentions to harm her may have been long-standing. A friend's conversation with detectives took on new significance, revealing that Clay and Channon's relationship was troubled. Channon had confided in friends that she was tired of Clay's controlling behavior and criticism, and had feared he might harm her if she ever left him. In fact, Channon had contacted the police multiple times between June and November 2011, reporting that Clay was stalking her and making her feel unsafe in her own home. She had become so fearful that she refused to give anyone a spare key to her house. Ultimately, Channon secured a restraining order against Clay, limiting their communication to text messages. A thorough examination of her diary revealed that she not only feared her former lover but also believed he was manipulating their children against her. Clay had been spreading vicious rumors and portraying her as promiscuous. As a result, when he was arrested on February 6, 2012, the children refused to believe he was involved. The discovery of a tracking program on Channon's laptop, a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop computer, in Clay's house, and printed correspondences did not seem to disturb them. The older children questioned the authenticity of the DNA analysis, thinking the accusations against their father were unbelievable and the case was fabricated. However, law enforcement and other relatives had a different perspective. At the trial, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of physical evidence and testimonies, confidently demonstrating Clay's guilt. In June 2013, justice was served when Clay Starbuck was found guilty of first-degree deprivation of life under aggravating circumstances and disrespect to human remains. He was sentenced to life without parole. His 2015 appeal was denied. He's serving time in Spokane County. Channon's family grieves her loss, but the children siding with their father hurts more. His obsession led to revenge, leaving the children without a mother or father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jorge Cortez. Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was born on January 5, 1978, in Mexico City. He kept his childhood and teenage years private, only sharing that he often clashed with his mother, who cared deeply for him, and his father, who rarely intervened in their arguments. Jorge's strained family relationships likely contributed to his emotional isolation and the development of his aggressive and unstable personality. To escape his difficult home life, Jorge left at a young age and embarked on a journey across Mexico, taking on temporary jobs to support himself. He worked as a waiter in various bars in Mexico City, including those in the Rosa and Cona districts, and also relied on tips from tourists in the popular Villa Du and Cuac districts, known for their extensive infrastructure and diverse entertainment options. Jorge's life of crime began in this place. In 2010, he was arrested for theft and given a 4-year prison sentence. However, because it was his first offense, the judge decided to release him on bail. At the time, no one suspected that this decision would set free a man who would later become one of Mexico's most notorious criminals. After his release, Jorge met a girl named Adriana and fell in love. Initially, he treated her with kindness and attention, but as their relationship deepened, his behavior became increasingly violent. Adriana soon found herself a victim of his physical abuse. Exhausted by his cruelty, she decided to end the relationship, but Jorge refused to accept her decision. One night, Jorge violently attacked Adriana, dragging her down the stairs by her hair and breaking her nose. He beat her so severely that she lost consciousness. When she came to, she saw Jorge holding a lighter and threatening to kill them both if she didn't stay with him. Despite his threats, Adriana continued to resist, which further enraged Jorge. He attempted to strangle her by grabbing her neck with both hands. However, Adriana managed to break free, grabbed a hammer, and began fighting back. She was able to force Jorge out of the apartment and ultimately out of her life for good. This violent confrontation occurred in 2011, and although Adriana reported the incident to the police, Jorge was released on bail and avoided punishment. In hindsight, Adriana's escape from Jorge that night saved her from a potentially deadly situation. Jorge would go on to take the lives of multiple women in the future. After meeting Jorge, 18-year-old Yang Kiang Marie became his new victim. Yang was a Korean girl who was very close to her mother, Monica, and her sisters, particularly Anna. Anna was a lively and athletic young woman who balanced her studies in psychology with a part-time job at a restaurant. Yang met Jorge at one of the bars where he worked, and they were immediately drawn to each other. After a brief courtship, they started dating, but their relationship was marked by violence. Despite their frequent arguments, they stayed together. When Yang turned 19, she decided to declare her independence from her family and move to the city with Jorge. However, this change only made their problems worse. Jorge's behavior became increasingly controlling and abusive. He constantly monitored Yang's activities, calling her every hour at work and restricting her interactions with friends. As a result, Yang felt trapped and realized she was a victim of domestic violence. However, she hid the truth from others, including her family, to avoid causing them concern. Only a few close people, including her sister Anna and some friends, knew about the situation. Despite her family's warnings and advice to leave Jorge, Yang struggled to break free. She attempted to leave him multiple times but always returned, held back by her own fears and vulnerabilities. During this time, Yang underwent a significant transformation, changing from a happy and lively person to someone who was depressed and willing to do anything to please Jorge. The relationship continued to deteriorate, becoming increasingly toxic and damaging to Yang's well-being. Yang's relationship with Jorge was marked by violent outbursts. On one occasion, Jorge refused to let Yang into their apartment when she came home late. On another, he locked her inside, set her clothes on fire, and chased her around the room in a fit of rage. In August 2014, their arguments escalated, and Yang decided to leave Jorge and move in with her parents. A friend encouraged her to report Jorge to the police and end the abuse. Although Yang initially agreed, she eventually returned to Jorge and they continued living together. Tragically, Yang's life was cut short. On September 21st, her body was discovered in their apartment, bearing signs of severe bruising. Jorge claimed to have found Yang hanging in the bedroom, stating that he had left her sleeping at noon the previous day, September 20th, after she had worked a shift at the bar. Jorge claimed that he returned home on the morning of September 21st to find Yang deceased. He immediately contacted the police and notified Yang's family of the tragic event. The news of Yang's death was devastating to her family, prompting Monica and Anna to rush to the scene. Upon arrival, they found police officers and forensic experts already at the apartment, carefully removing Yang's body from the bed. Jorge stated that when he saw his deceased wife, he became frantic and attempted to assist her. A police officer explained to the family that an investigation was ongoing and they needed to stay outside the house to protect potential evidence. As they watched, Yang's body, covered with a sheet, was carried out of the house. The police also informed them that the initial evidence suggested Yang's death was a suicide, a conclusion supported by the position of the body in Jorge's account, which the police believed to be truthful. However, Yang's family was skeptical and struggled to accept this explanation, finding it hard to believe that she would take her own life. When the family arrived to identify the body and prepare the necessary documents, they were surprised to find that the examination protocol was almost complete. The death certificate stated that Yang had died from strangulation by hanging. However, when the relatives were allowed to view the body, they noticed bruises on Yang's legs that seemed suspicious. Jorge attempted to explain the bruises by saying that the body had slipped from his hands and fallen to the floor when he tried to move it from the bed. Monica was not convinced by Jorge's explanation and suspected that something was not quite right. Investigations revealed more about Yang's tumultuous relationship with Jorge, fueling suspicion that her death might not be the suicide police claimed. During police testimony, friends described constant fighting between they, revealing Jorge's history of jealousy and aggression. His behavior extended to frequent phone calls to Yang's workplace, indicating a pattern of controlling behavior. Yang's sister Anna noted that a few months before the tragedy, her behavior dramatically shifted. Anna added that she started distancing herself from the family once the relationship with Jorge started. This prompted concern within the family. Despite growing concerns about Jorge's unstable behavior and doubts about the official explanation, the police were quick to dismiss theories and rushed to close the case. Experts at the Katok morgue recommended cremating Yang's body, which meant that further forensic investigation would not be possible. Yang's mother was deeply suspicious of Jorge's involvement in her daughter's death, but she eventually agreed to the cremation due to pressure from her family, thereby giving up the chance to gather evidence to support her suspicions. Jorge did not attend the funeral, but he got a tattoo of a broken heart, supposedly to show his grief. However, he also cut off all contact with Yang's family. Yang's death had a devastating impact on her family, especially her mother, Monica. The overwhelming pain of losing her daughter, combined with feelings of loneliness and despair, led Monica to develop an addiction to alcohol and smoking. Monica was devastated when her daughter Yang passed away suddenly. Despite her overwhelming grief, Monica refused to accept the initial explanation of Yang's death, finding it contradictory to her daughter's outgoing and life-loving nature. Unsettled by details like the bruises on Yang's body and the lack of evidence supporting the claimed manner of death, Monica's instincts told her there was more to the story. To get answers, Monica launched her own investigation into the case. Monica acquired security footage from her daughter's home, revealing her son-in-law Jorge was the last person to see Yang alive. With the help of a private attorney and forensic pathologist, Monica reviewed Yang's final days. An unexpected development led to a shocking explanation, revealing a deeply seated scandal and a misclassified homicide. Monica's determination uncovered hidden details, ultimately revealing the truth behind Yang's death. The detective completely rejected the initial account of Yang's death, presenting conclusive evidence that proved she was murdered. Further investigation revealed several discrepancies with the original autopsy. There were no signs of hanging on Yang's body, but her neck showed signs of strangulation, and a scarf had been used to make it appear as though she had hanged herself. Bruises on her hands and fingernails suggested she had tried to fight back. The medical examiner confirmed that any competent expert would have reached the same conclusion. This raises serious questions. Why did the police ignore these facts, and why did the family receive a false report about their daughter's death? Monica's relentless pursuit of truth led her to conduct a 7-month investigation, uncovering a series of disturbing failures and incompetence by law enforcement agencies. Her research revealed that Yang had previously reported violence by Jorge to the police, but her cries for help were ignored. Monica also discovered that Jorge had ties to his father and the staff handling the case, which, combined with the severity of Yang's injuries and the apparent negligence of the authorities, compelled her to take decisive action. Monica appealed to the prosecutor's office, seeking a review of the case and justice for Jorge, the main suspect. However, she was met with neglect and cynicism instead of support. A prosecutor even questioned her competence, suggesting she should focus on being a housewife and seek psychological help rather than pursuing justice. Undeterred, Monica continued her investigation, driven by her love for her child and her desire for truth. Her perseverance ultimately paid off. Jorge committed another murder in 2016, a devastating end to Yang's story. This event began a new chapter in Campira's life. She met Jorge online, where he hid his dark nature behind a charming facade. Unaware of his past, she was drawn to his friendly, sociable personality, and they soon developed a romantic relationship. Campira's close friends discovered her new relationship when she posted a photo of herself and her boyfriend on social media, beaming with happiness. For several weeks, their romance seemed perfect. As 2016 drew to a close, Campira's mother, Margarita, met Jorge for the first time on December 28. Campira, Jorge, and her children then traveled to Acapulco to spend the New Year's holidays with her parents. However, Jorge later convinced Campira to extend their stay, and she asked her mother to watch the children for a few more days. Margarita agreed, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. 3 days later, Campira was found dead. The last time Margarita had spoken to her daughter was on December 30th. When Margarita tried to call Campira on New Year's Eve, she was met with silence. Campira always answered her phone or returned calls promptly, so Margarita's anxiety grew with each passing minute. As the hours ticked by, Campira's unusual silence and lack of online activity only heightened Margarita's concerns. Eventually, Margarita decided to contact Jorge to find out what had happened to her daughter. Jorge attempted to alleviate Margarita's concerns by downplaying the argument and Campira departure to celebrate the new year with friends. However, Margarita remained unconvinced and asked a family friend to check on Campira. When the friend arrived at Campira's house, Jorge told him that Campira was asleep and unable to meet with him. Margarita's suspicions grew, and she sensed that Jorge was hiding something. On December 31st, between 5 o'clock and 8 p.m., Jorge committed a heinous crime. He brutally murdered Campira by strangling her after beating her severely with an unknown object, leaving multiple injuries on her face and body. In an attempt to make it appear as though Campira had taken her own life, Jorge cut a lock of her hair, placed her body on the bed, covered it with a blanket, and left the gas stove on. He even placed a portrait of Campira's late ex-husband in her hand to create the illusion that memories of him had driven her to suicide. Around 8:30 p.m., Jorge packed his belongings and left the house. On the night of January 1, 2017, Margarita tried to contact her daughter Campira to wish her a happy new year, but was unable to reach her. She then called her son Gabriel, who was in the same city as Campira, and asked him to check on her. When Gabriel arrived at his sister's house, he was immediately hit with a strong smell of gas. After turning off the gas burners, he began searching for Campira and was shocked to find her body on the couch, bearing signs of a brutal beating on her face. As Gabriel threw off the blanket covering his sister's body, he was horrified by what he saw. Campira was wearing only her underwear, and her body was covered in numerous bruises. Several details caught his attention. There were drops of blood around her, although her body in underwear appeared clean, as if she had recently bathed. Additionally, Campira's head was almost completely shaved, which struck Gabriel as strange, as his sister was known to take great care of her hair. Gabriel reported the incident to the police and then called his mother to break the news to Margarita. Paramedics and police arrived, confirmed Campira's death, and restricted access to the scene. The family was stunned by grief, struggling to come to terms with what happened. Their eyes reflected sadness and a glimmer of hope for justice. The investigation was complicated by inconsistencies between the crime scene and the initial assumption of suicide. The police meticulously examined every detail to unravel the truth. The police initially suspected suicide, but Campira's family disputed this, finding it impossible to believe that a young, cheerful woman would take such a drastic step. Campira's family was convinced that her death was not a suicide, but a violent crime. A strand of hair found on her body that did not match anyone in the house reinforced their suspicions. They demanded a more thorough investigation, which was granted. A second forensic examination confirmed their fears, revealing that Campira was strangled and that the suicide scene was staged. The evidence included marks on her trachea and neck, bruises indicating a beating, and the absence of a strand of hair. The police launched an investigation, and Campira's aunt, Sandra, worked with the deputy prosecutor to have the case transferred to the prosecutor's office. However, progress was slow. Later, Sandra was called back to the prosecutor's office and informed that she and her brother, Gabriel, could be plaintiffs in the case. Campira's children were left with their grandmother after the tragedy. To shield them from painful memories, they were transferred to a new school. However, time alone didn't heal their wounds. 2 months later, the family was allowed to visit the apartment where Campira's body was found, collecting her belongings and possibly uncovering clues. Her laptop was found, but its data had been deleted. Fortunately, her iPad was password protected, and the last photos she took before her death were recovered. One disturbing photo showed Campira lying next to Jorge on the same sofa where her body was later found. Further investigation of the photos revealed more evidence. In one image, Jorge was seen holding a skull-shaped container that was later discovered in the apartment's freezer. He was also shown strangling Campira with one hand. Drawers in the desk yielded sketches of tattoos Jorge planned to get, further hinting at his possible involvement in the crime. The public was outraged when Jorge was released on bail in 2009, sparking widespread anger. Many realized that if he had been detained earlier, the young women might still be alive. The Campira and Young families continued to demand justice for their loved ones on social media, gathering over 13,000 supporters on a memorial page. 10 months after his escape, Jorge was finally caught on October 24, 2017. His arrest was unexpected, occurring during a routine patrol by the National Civilian Police in Livingston, Guatemala. The officers were patrolling the streets when they noticed a suspicious man who appeared to be homeless. A routine check of his documents and fingerprints revealed a shocking truth: the man was on the international wanted list with a high danger level. Jorge was immediately arrested and taken to the immigration center in Guatemala City, where he was detained pending further action. The Guatemalan authorities quickly contacted their Mexican counterparts to initiate the extradition process. According to the head of the Guatemalan police, Pablo Castillo, Jorge had been hiding under a bridge in western Guatemala, living on the streets and relying on the kindness of tourists for survival. The next day, October 25th, Jorge was transported to the Mexican border city of Chicas, where he was handed over to the Mexican authorities. After crossing the border, Jorge was taken to Mexico City, marking the successful completion of the extradition process and the delivery of justice. Jorge appeared in court to face charges for his alleged crimes. A reporter managed to ask him a few questions, but Jorge responded with a complete denial of any wrongdoing, claiming he was unaware of the charges against him. This was despite being taken to court on October 26th for a preventive measure, specifically for the murder of Campura. During the trial, the prosecution presented strong evidence of Jorge's involvement in the crime. The investigation revealed that Jorge had brutally beaten the victim with an unknown object before strangling her to death. The prosecutor classified the crime as a feminicide, made worse by the fact that Jorge had a romantic relationship with the victim. The prosecutor also pointed out that Jorge had a prior conviction for theft and was possibly involved in the death of another ex-girlfriend, Jan. Despite the overwhelming evidence and arguments against Jorge, his lawyer proposed an alternative explanation that Jorge was mentally unstable and needed a psychological evaluation. This move came as the community awaited justice, expecting a suitable punishment for the perpetrator. After thoroughly examining the evidence, witness testimonies, and arguments, the judge turned his attention to Jorge and his lawyer. He asked how long it would take to complete the psychological evaluation. Following a consultation, Jorge's lawyer agreed that Jorge would attend all subsequent court hearings. Upon reviewing all materials and considering both sides, the judge rendered a verdict. There was sufficient evidence from the prosecutor to hold Jorge accountable for his crimes. The court ordered the investigation to continue and gave a 4-month deadline to gather new evidence. Meanwhile, Jorge was taken into custody and held at a pre-trial detention center. Despite Jorge's arrest and guilty verdict, the Campura and Jan families faced a lengthy and challenging process ahead. In August 2019, an oral hearing was held in Jorge's case. His lawyer asked the court to disregard the videos that showed Jorge entering and leaving Campura's house on the day she was murdered. They claimed that these videos were incomplete, taken from a 30-hour recording at the crime scene, and could not be used to prove Jorge's guilt. The videos had been given to the victim's family by a neighbor who recorded them. The family then passed them on to the police, who brought only partial recordings to court. The police had lost the original disc. Jorge's lawyer alleged that the Mexico City prosecutor's office had concealed this information, which only came to light on the day of the hearing. The defense lawyer argued that the materials used to obtain the arrest warrant were unlawful. Specifically, the lawyer claimed that a key video was given to the Campura family rather than the judicial authorities, and therefore could not be used as evidence. Despite this, the supervisory judge rejected the defense's petition after considering the prosecution's arguments and the testimony of Campura's friends and neighbors. Additionally, the court considered 2 witness statements, but did not accept them as evidence. The case proceeded, and Jorge was allowed to appeal the decision and present the same arguments again. Meanwhile, the Young family was dealing with their own separate case. A ban on violence against women was established in Mexico City, thanks in part to advocacy from several groups, including the Mexican Institute of Human Rights and Democracy and the Center for Justice. This new decree was influenced by multiple high-profile crimes, including the murder of Jan. As a result, her case was forwarded to a Mexico City court for trial. Nearly 7 years after Yang's murder, charges were formally brought against her suspected killer, Jorge, in May 2021. Shortly thereafter, a judge ordered his arrest for his role in her murder. Despite these developments, Jorge's defense team was able to significantly slow down the investigation and prosecution. 9 years after Yang's death, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was sentenced to 52 years and 6 months in prison in November 2023 for taking Yang's life. While the Young family has finally received justice, Campira's family still faces a lengthy process. A trial had been scheduled for April 2022 at the detention center where Jorge was being held. Activists were resolute that this time the perpetrator would not evade accountability. Jorge's lawyers have successfully delayed the hearing once again, which was set to take place on January 29, 2024. Over 50 witnesses were expected to be called to testify, but for now, there is no update on the status of the hearing in the media. Jorge's family remains hopeful that he will eventually be held accountable for his actions. While nothing can bring Campira back, they seek justice and want to ensure that her death does not go unpunished. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christy Lynn Mullins. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio, one of 6 children in a large family. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise and chaos of the city. In the summer of 1975, 14-year-old Christy spent most of her days socializing with friends and family, often going to the local neighborhood swimming pool. In late August, Christy babysat for a family friend on the evening of August 22nd. The next day, August 23rd, she woke up around noon and decided to go swimming to cool off. She invited her sister Kim to join her and they went to the residential area. While Kim went swimming, Christy relaxed on a deck chair. A short time later, Kim went ashore and found Christy nowhere to be seen, but Kim decided not to look for her and instead stayed at the pool. Surprisingly, when Kim returned home, Christy was not there. Hours passed and Christy still hadn't come home. Kim became even more worried. She decided to look for Christy and ran into a neighbor who told her that the police had found the body of a young woman a few miles away, but they had not been able to identify it. Kim rushed home to tell her parents, who immediately called the police to report Christy missing. It was very likely that the body found belonged to Christy, so the police directed them to the morgue for identification. Although it was difficult to recognize the identity of the body due to the severely bruised face, Christy's mother eventually accepted that the body was Christy's, her beloved daughter, thanks to the birthmark on her leg. Police later explained to the family what had happened. It turned out that at about 2:30 p.m. that same day, a man reported finding a body in the woods behind the local shopping center. He, his wife, and son had gone there to buy toys, but before entering the store, their son wanted to take a walk on the trail behind the building. This path was a popular walking path leading to a river and the area was famous for its beauty. Together with his parents, the son went for a walk on this trail. During their hike, they came across a disturbing scene about 10 yards down the trail. A man was kneeling on top of someone and repeatedly beating him with a wooden object. When he saw the family, he immediately ran away. The father rushed to the scene and found a seriously injured little girl covered in blood. His wife, who had medical training, checked the victim's pulse, but there was none. The father quickly went to a nearby shopping center and called the police from a store. He and his wife provided investigators with a detailed description of the suspect, who was a tall, slim young man with long black hair, wearing jean shorts and boots, about 20 years old. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on their description and distributed it to patrol officers. However, the investigation of the crime scene yielded no results. The wooden object used as the murder weapon was found, but they discovered no other evidence linking the perpetrator. Notably, the victim's hands were tied with a telephone cord and her bikini top was pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were found next to her body. Despite these signs, forensic experts found no evidence that a sexual assault had occurred. Luckily, detectives were able to continue their investigation thanks to new information from Kim, who told them about a conversation between Christy and a friend, Carol. The police summoned Carol. Carol recounted to police a suspicious phone call she had received from a stranger claiming to be a local DJ. The man had called her to talk about a fake cheerleading competition at the state fair, which was supposedly being held behind the local shopping mall. He announced the event would start at 1:45 p.m. and had told Carol to wait for someone at the entrance to the forest trail. The police were skeptical about Carol's story, and when they dug deeper, they discovered many inconsistencies. According to Carol, she had originally planned to attend the event with her sister. But they had run into Christy and her sister on the way. Carol then invited Christy to join her, and they left their sisters behind to go to the mall. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the woods, no one appeared, and Carol claimed that she had gone to the shopping center to ask for the time. When she turned around, Christy was gone. The police investigation revealed that there had been no cheerleading competitions in town, casting doubt on the reason for Carol and Christy's trip to the woods. Police suspected that the mysterious phone call might have been a ruse to lure Carol into the woods, but they were unable to trace the call to identify the caller. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in Carol's story. She claimed to have met Christy and her sister on the street, but Kim said they had been at the pool and Carol had come to meet them there. Additionally, Christy's mother reported a strange conversation with Carol later that evening, which raised further suspicions. Carol apologized to Christy's mother and revealed that she had been the intended target of a murder involving two people. However, she quickly retracted her words and left. Christy's mother reported this to the police. The police questioned Carol again, but she denied making a statement and stuck to her original story. Carol was then given a polygraph test, which did not reveal any signs of deception when Carol answered key questions. As a result, investigators shifted focus away from Carol and pursued other leads. Police intensified their search for the killer 3 days after Christy's murder. A police officer patrolling the streets of Columbus spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to a sketch of Christy's killer. Patrol officers quickly called detectives to the scene and asked Jack to accompany them to the station for questioning. The man, Jack Carmen, 25, agreed to go with them. However, the police soon realized that Jack was severely mentally disabled, with an IQ of about 50 points. Results based on many different tests. As a result, Jack had limited communication skills and could not read or write. He was cared for by a specialist medical facility and lived in a supervised apartment. Despite these challenges, detectives could not ignore the striking resemblance between Jack and the composite sketch of the suspect in Christy's case. The interrogation process was extremely difficult due to Jack's limited ability to understand and answer questions. Most of the time, he just answered with one word or stayed silent. The detectives began to question whether Jack was capable of fully understanding their questions. To improve the situation, they had to ask very simple and specific questions. After 6 hours of questioning, detectives were finally starting to get results. They were finally able to extract a confession from Jack. According to his testimony, on the day in question he had left his apartment, taken the bus to the shopping center and bought a shirt and pants. As Jack walked through the parking lot, he saw Christy sitting on a fence near the entrance to a wooded trail. He approached her, tied her up by tying her hands, and then dragged her into the woods where he carried out the assault. After the attack, Christy tried to run away, but Jack quickly caught up with her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and repeatedly hit her in the head. Jack then ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and boarded the bus. The next day, police took Jack to the forest where he allegedly committed the crime. There, he pointed out the exact spot and provided specific details that only the perpetrator would know, including the fact that the piece of wood used to strike the victim broke in half. Investigators also verified the testimony, asking the couple who found Christy to identify the person they had seen on the day of the incident. Both identified the man they had seen as Jack. As a result, Jack was charged with multiple offenses, including assault and murder. The prosecution chose to include it in the charges. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer negotiated a deal. In exchange for a life sentence, Jack would plead guilty before the judge, thereby avoiding execution. The case moved swiftly, with thousands of people following. Just 11 days after the murder, on September 3rd, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, after the trial, public opinion began to shift, and many people started to question Jack's guilt. As more details about his confession and his background emerged in the media, people began to wonder whether he was truly capable of committing such a heinous crime. Those who knew Jack found it hard to believe that he was capable of the crime. He was a passive, timid, and compliant person who would agree to anything if pushed hard enough. In the past, he had even taken the blame for something he didn't do, like the time he claimed responsibility for breaking a boiler at a charity center, when in fact someone else was to blame. This behavior raised doubts about his ability to make a genuine confession to the crime. His supporters felt that the police must have manipulated him into confessing by feeding him information and asking pressured questions. For instance, if the police asked him if he hit the victim with a piece of wood, and he answered yes, they could use that as a confession. However, this approach can be unreliable, especially considering Jack's tendency to confess to anything when under threat. Even the mention of the electric chair was enough to make him agree to whatever the detectives wanted. Furthermore, the police took Jack to the crime scene at the same time as the witnesses, a married couple who later identified him at the police station. This raised concerns that the witnesses had been biased, as they had already seen Jack and knew he was a suspect, despite the police's claims that they never crossed paths. There were several red flags surrounding Jack's alleged involvement in the crime. For instance, the police failed to locate the bus driver or any passengers who claimed to have seen Jack on his way to the city center, which contradicted his own statement. Moreover, multiple people at the charity organization building where Jack lived and worked said to have seen him at around 1:30 p.m. This created a major timing issue. Even if Jack had left immediately after being seen by these witnesses, the bus ride to the shopping center on the outskirts of town would have taken at least 40 minutes. Given the crime was committed at 1:50 p.m., it was logistically impossible for Jack to have made it on time. This cast serious doubts about Jack's guilt and raised suspicions that the police may have coerced his confession. Christie's parents, too, began questioning whether Jack was the true culprit. At the height of the controversy, approximately 70 individuals gathered in front of City Hall on September 9th to draw attention to the case and advocate for a comprehensive investigation. They established a public committee aimed at securing justice for Jack. As a result, Jack was assigned a new lawyer, who swiftly petitioned for a case review. After several months, a judge dismissed Jack's original confession and ordered a new trial, putting the onus on the prosecution to establish his guilt from the beginning. This marked a daunting challenge for the prosecution, making their case almost unviable. Norman Mills, Christie's father, began his own investigation while preparations for the new trial were underway. Dissatisfied with the way the detectives had worked, Norman took matters into his own hands. Immediately after the murder, Norman and several neighbors searched the area where Christie was found. They discovered a bloody pair of jean shorts and men's underwear in the woods. They turned the items over to the police, who had initially missed them. It was unclear whether these items were related to the case or if they had been examined for evidence. Jack's new trial began in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two tasks: first and foremost, to prove Jack's innocence and also to try to identify the real killer. In fact, they already had a pretty strong candidate for the role, who they considered to be the prime suspect. The man who found Christ's body along with his wife was Henry Newell, who was 25 years old at the time of the murder. At the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had amassed an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder, and during the trial, the list grew even longer. Initially, Henry attracted attention because of his criminal record. Beginning in his teenage years, he had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, serving 3 prison sentences. He had successfully escaped from prison twice before being captured and brought back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th sentence, this time for burning down a house to collect insurance money. Lawyers also reviewed evidence from Christ's case and found some very suspicious details in his testimony. Henry said he had found her body, ran over, and threw a bloody piece of wood aside. He explained this by saying that he was in a state of shock at the time. But acting like that still seemed odd. Why did he pick up the murder weapon and throw it from his body for no apparent reason? He also testified that he thought the girl was still alive, so he took off his shirt and pressed it to her face. This action also raised questions. Did he actually try to stop the bleeding, or was his shirt stained with blood during the murder, and he needed to justify it somehow? Jack's lawyer found a store clerk in the mall where Henry had run to call the police. She said he was not wearing a shirt but was wearing jean shorts, although by the time police arrived, he was wearing a different pair of pants. The employee also confirmed that Henry had a new bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When asked why she didn't immediately report this to the police, she said no one had asked her. The officers themselves should have noticed this bruising but ignored it. Henry also agreed to take a polygraph test, but he ended up vomiting right on the machine. Another witness was Henry's neighbor, who said that on the night of the murder, he had talked to Henry and noticed many new scratches on his hands. The man also mentioned seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that was the same color and shape as the cord used to tie the victim's hands. That's not all. The neighbor said that Henry had once told him a very strange story. He claimed to know Christ's 14-year-old friend Carol and that they had once swum naked together in the pool. This story shocked everyone involved in the case. It turned out that Henry was acquainted with Carol, who was also directly involved in the case. His wife, Pam, also testified in court, saying everything had happened exactly as they told police on the first day. They had gone to the mall, and their son wanted to go for a walk. They went into the woods and found the body. Pam added that up until that point, Henry had remained at home and only stepped outside for a few minutes to scare away neighborhood children who had begun throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also testified, saying she had never met Henry. She was also asked about her intentions in telling Christ's mother that things should not have escalated to this point, but Carol again claimed she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime. One of the most important moments of the trial was the showing of the entire recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became clear to everyone that Jack had simply been forced to confirm the detective's words that he had committed murder. Jack barely said anything and didn't seem to fully understand what the police wanted from him. But that was not the most important moment of the trial. On the 5th day, another unexpected witness appeared. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony truly shocked everyone following the case. Bobby revealed that that day, Henry had indeed gone out of the house to chase away the children who had thrown firecrackers into the yard. When Henry returned home, his shirt and sandals were missing, and Henry had scars on his hands and face. Bobby was told by his parents that they would be going to the shopping center, but when they arrived, they instead took him on a walk in the woods behind the center. Bobby claims he never asked to go for a walk, which contradicts what his parents initially said. During the walk, they found Henry's torn sandal and then Christy's body. Bobby's mother instructed him not to tell anyone about what he saw. At the trial, Bobby's grandmother testified about a disturbing comment made by Henry during Christy's farewell ceremony. After expressing her sadness about Christy's death, Henry replied, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, Henry's friend, came forward and said that Henry had confessed to him that he accidentally killed Christie. Although the evidence clearly pointed to Henry's involvement, the prosecutor surprisingly announced that they would not pursue a case against Henry. The prosecutor also claimed that the initial investigation was handled correctly, despite acknowledging that the police missed or ignored many clues from the beginning. The public was outraged by this decision, leading the prosecutor to change his mind 2 days later and agree to reopen the investigation into Christie's death. Christie's father refused to give up on seeking justice and filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but not because he believed Jack was involved in the murder. Rather, he hoped to gain access to the case files and gather more information. Unfortunately, this effort also proved unsuccessful. The case had remained stagnant until 2013, when Henry died of terminal cancer. Despite this, in the same year, former attorney John Aller became interested in the case and conducted his own investigation. He contacted all parties involved in gathering new information. Christie's relatives had provided John with a box of records that Christie's father had collected. After reviewing the records and talking to dozens of people, John believed that Henry was the culprit behind Christie's murder. John's investigation revealed that Carol had bought marijuana from Henry, which made him suspect that Henry was involved in the crime. This new discovery created a possible connection between Henry and Carol, which could explain why Carol brought Christie to the forest. One theory is that Carol planned to meet Henry in the forest to buy an illegal substance. It's possible that Carol invited Christie along, using the DJ story as a cover. A more sinister explanation suggests that Carol brought Christie to the forest at Henry's request, intending for him to harm her. However, Christie resisted, as evidenced by Henry's injuries, and he ultimately killed her. When John took over the case, Henry had passed away from cancer at the age of 63. However, John continued his work and released a book about Christie's murder. The release of the book sparked a new wave of interest, and Christie's relatives demanded that the investigation be reopened. Some of Henry's relatives also confirmed that Henry was the one who killed the girl. This led to the reopening of the murder investigation in May 2014. Detectives re-examined the evidence, interviewed dozens of people, and reassessed Henry's confession. They re-examined Christie's clothes and found traces of semen, but they were too small for DNA analysis. The investigation lasted until late 2015, when detectives announced that Henry was the one who had committed the crime. But because he had passed away, the case could not go to court. The investigation ended with the conclusion that Henry had left home, gone to the road behind the shopping center, seen Christie alone, and decided to assault her with a telephone cord, taking her deep into the woods. Henry had attacked Christie, injuring her. Then he killed her with a piece of wood. Returning home, Henry recounted the incident to his wife, and the two began to make plans to avoid punishment. For many years afterward, Carol never revealed the truth. Police later apologized to Christie's family for their careless handling of the incident. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, United States. She grew up in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced adulthood early. At the age of 16, she became pregnant but was determined to be a good mother. Danielle's relationship with Carl, the father of her child, ended in divorce. In 1996, she gave birth to her son Tristan at the age of 17, and despite the difficulties ahead, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. Then she met Luis Payano, a man who would become Tristan's father. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers, initially as friends, but their relationship developed into love. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and for a time, it seemed like all their problems had been solved. The couple moved in together, and Danielle secured an office job at a landscaping company, a position she was proud to have obtained. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. Her life was on the right track, with a loving son, a fiancé, and promising career prospects. On March 15, 1999, Luis returned home from work to find his fiancée, 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, lying lifeless on the bed in their Ashley Lakes apartment in Norcross, Georgia. Their young son, Tristan, was at daycare at the time. Luis immediately realized Danielle was dead due to her skin color and called 911. When the police arrived, Luis was waiting for them and reported what he had found. He explained that upon entering the apartment, he saw Danielle lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered she was dead. The police naturally suspected Luis, and they took him in for questioning while a team of officers thoroughly examined the crime scene. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed, fully clothed, with a sock around her neck. This suggested that the perpetrator intended to kill her, leaving no chance for survival. The fact that the stocking was tied at the back indicated that the perpetrator was behind Danielle when they strangled her. The crime scene showed signs of disarray, with the bed messed up and a dresser drawer open. It's possible that the perpetrator took the stocking from Danielle's drawer. The contents of her purse had been dumped and rummaged through, leading police to consider the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, several valuable items, including cameras and jewelry, were left untouched. This led police to speculate that the perpetrator may have intended to steal something but encountered Danielle and decided to kill her to avoid being identified as a witness. The lack of forced entry at the front door and the locked sliding glass door in the backyard raised suspicions that the crime scene might have been staged. Despite searching the surrounding area, police found no evidence. After investigating the crime scene, police discovered that Danielle may have let the killer into her home voluntarily or that the killer had a key to the apartment. As a result, the prime suspect became Danielle's fiancé, Luis Payano. When police started questioning Luis, he displayed intense emotions. The police were aware that romantic relationships can sometimes escalate into anger, leading to devastating consequences. To begin the interrogation, they asked Luis about his whereabouts on the day of Danielle's death. Luis claimed he spent the entire day at work. He last saw Danielle when they both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but she returned briefly to retrieve something. According to Luis, Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management at work and seemed slightly distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day but couldn't reach her. Concerned, he called her co-workers, who told him she had gone out for lunch but failed to return to work. Luis then contacted their home, where he spoke to someone named Lise, who also hadn't heard from Danielle. Luis left work to check on Danielle at their home in the Ashley Lakes apartments. When he arrived, he found something unsettling: the front door was unlocked. Upon entering, he saw a jar on the floor. During the investigation into Danielle's death, police questioned Luis about his relationship with her. They asked if the couple had frequent arguments or domestic problems. Luis insisted that their relationship was good and that they loved each other very much. Clearly feeling confused, he became frustrated with the questioning, believing that the police were wasting their time by focusing on him. He insisted that they should find the real culprit, who was still at large. Police also spoke to Danielle's friends and family, all of whom sided with Luis. Luis and Danielle were madly in love and were planning their wedding. However, their happiness did not last long. During the investigation into Danielle's case, Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, providing him with a solid alibi and eliminating him as a suspect. During the interrogation, Louise said that Danielle's coworker Jeff was showing her too much attention and she was unhappy about it. The police immediately went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss. Danielle's boss confirmed to the police that Danielle had complained about an employee named Jeff. Jeff was a middle-aged man who was a manager at the company. Danielle complained to her boss that Jeff was constantly hanging around her, interfering with her work, and behaving inappropriately. There was a significant age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40 years old and she was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch and Danielle told him that she had a fiancé. She refused to go to lunch with Jeff. The company where Danielle worked took her complaints seriously. On the day of her murder, she had a meeting regarding a complaint she had filed with management against Jeff. She was very nervous about it. She feared that her career might be in jeopardy because she was a new employee and Jeff was her manager. Her co-workers mentioned that Danielle had gone home for lunch after this meeting but had not returned. That gave the police a time frame for when Danielle's attack occurred. The investigation revealed Jeff's involvement, especially when it was discovered that he was absent from the office at the time of the crime and did not return until later in the evening. Police focused on Jeff as a suspect, possibly following Danielle home and attacking her when she opened the door, which would explain the lack of signs of entry. Jeff was called in for questioning and asked to describe his relationship with Danielle. He admitted that he invited her to lunch but denied his involvement in her death. Jeff didn't deny liking her, however. He claimed he had not behaved inappropriately towards Danielle and was surprised when she filed a complaint against him. The investigators asked him if Danielle's complaint was a reason for wanting to harm her. His first reaction to this question was anger. He was adamant that he wasn't the one who took her life. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have been the one who attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to him, he was with another colleague, and they were driving around the city solving some work issues. They had been together all day, so he couldn't be the one who took Danielle's life. Jeff told investigators the name of the coworker whom he claimed he was with at the time of the crime. The detectives met with this man, and he confirmed Jeff's words, thus they excluded another person from the list of suspects. The next day, investigators received the autopsy report and examined it in the hope of getting some clues that would help them track down the perpetrator. The cause of Danielle's death was asphyxia. It seemed evident that Danielle's attack had taken her by surprise. The investigators concluded that someone had come up to her from behind and pulled the stocking tight until she lost consciousness. After that, the perpetrator tied the stocking in a knot so Danielle could not regain consciousness. There were no defensive injuries on her body. In fact, there were no injuries at all except for the ligature mark on her neck. Perhaps Danielle didn't even see the face of the one who attacked her. The police found no evidence at the crime scene that could help identify the perpetrator. No shoe prints, no DNA, no fingerprints, no hair. There was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police had no new suspects, they returned to the version that what happened was a robbery that went wrong. They asked Louise to go through the apartment with them again. He carefully examined everything and said that nothing was missing from the apartment. All the things seemed to be in their usual places. However, a few days later, Lou called the police and said he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. He also drew the attention of investigators to another strange detail: the stocking that someone strangled Danielle with did not belong to her. According to Louise, she didn't wear stockings at all. It meant that whoever had done it had brought the stocking with them. Lacking any evidence, the investigators decided to look into Danielle's past. Perhaps what happened to her was connected with her past. They asked her friends about her previous relationships, in particular, her relationship with Carl, the father of her son Tristan. Her best friend told the police about Danielle's ex-boyfriend Eddie. She started dating him when she was already pregnant. Eddie was a violent guy, and as their relationship progressed, he became more domineering and tried to control all aspects of her life. It got to the point where he forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie deteriorated even more after Danielle gave birth to her son. Soon after, Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided it was time to end this relationship. She moved out and tried to start a new life, but Eddie had other plans. He did not accept rejection and behaved unpredictably. As a result, Danielle had to seek a restraining order against him. He violated it several times, called Danielle, parked near her house, and once even showed up at her work. Danielle's family told investigators that Eddie had called her several times in recent months. He told her to meet with him, but she always hung up. Eddie was the perfect suspect, so detectives tracked him down and brought him in for questioning. The man was hostile, and he wasn't eager to go to the police station. However, Eddie had an alibi. He said that Eddie was towing cars out of state at the time of the murder and that Eddie's boss, along with service logs and other receipts, could back him up. When the police confirmed his alibi, they released Eddie. 3 days after Danielle died, Danielle's neighbor, Kirk, called the police and told them about something that had happened to Kirk the week before the murder. Ms. Kirk said that recently in the apartment complex, residents often encounter a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker said he came to do a repair order. However, Ms. Kirk said that she felt very uncomfortable the whole time he was there because he kept staring at Kirk, as if he was more concerned with her than completing the repair order. The same thing happened to another woman. The maintenance worker insisted that he was there to change a light bulb, when the landlord said there were no bulbs to change. He mumbled and staggered, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," then backed up and walked away. Police investigations revealed that the complex had several maintenance workers, but the one who matched the descriptions of both women was Calvin Oliver, 42. According to records, Calvin had only started working at the complex in September 1998. At the time of Danielle's murder, 10 residents had reported cash, checks, and other valuables, including jewelry, computers, and guns, missing from their apartments without evidence of forced entry. Some even suggested that someone on the maintenance staff was responsible. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by the police, who initially asked him about a series of burglaries at the Ashley Lakes apartments. Calvin denied any involvement in the burglaries. When asked about Danielle Jennings, he said he had heard about what happened to her but did not know her. The only thing he confessed was that he had worked in her apartment. The police were about to release Calvin for lack of concrete evidence when they ran a final check of Calvin's database. The results were horrifying. They discovered that Calvin had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a theft charge related to the theft of a personal check. According to Georgia Department of Correction records, Calvin had a long-standing adult criminal record dating back to 1974. His convictions included multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery by force, and at least one count of forcibly pressuring a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, Calvin spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Given his extensive criminal history, it's surprising he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes Apartments. The police took Calvin Oliver into custody, which allowed them to thoroughly investigate his potential involvement in Danielle Jennings's death. As part of their ongoing inquiry into a string of thefts at Ashley Lakes' apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. During the search, they discovered stolen items from other residents. And the police discovered Danielle's wedding ring in his home. This discovery directly linked Oliver to Danielle's death. When the police questioned him about the wedding ring, Calvin claimed that he had stolen it about 3 weeks before Danielle's death. However, this claim was proven false. Calvin became a suspect and refused to cooperate with police after being caught lying. At trial, the prosecution argued that Calvin killed Danielle after she caught him breaking into her home. After a 5-day trial that ended on October 13, 2000, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. As a result, Calvin Oliver received a life sentence for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for the burglary. A subsequent investigation revealed that Ashley Lake Apartments management knew about Calvin's history of run-ins with the law and his lengthy criminal record. Despite this knowledge, they failed to conduct thorough background checks and failed to warn other residents when a series of burglaries occurred. When these facts came to light, Danielle's family filed a lawsuit against Ashley Lake Apartments that they argue that the evidence demonstrates a reckless disregard for the safety of others. After a trial, a jury returned a verdict of more than $13 million for Danielle's wrongful death. The complex's key policy was also flawed, prosecutors said. Employees had access to house keys, and the lockboxes containing keys to the complex's 240 apartments were often left unsecured. Calvin Oliver is now serving a life sentence in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blummel family. Roger Blummel, born January 17, 1965, was raised in a big, close-knit family with strong values. Even in high school, he was driven and ambitious. He worked in transportation and later discovered his talent in sales, where he excelled. Friends say he could sell anything to anyone, thanks to his kind, cheerful personality. He was always happy and loved making others smile. Roger enjoyed a fulfilling life and a strong bond with his family, but something was missing: a life partner. That all changed one day when he met the right person. Although the details of their meeting are unclear, a close friend recalled that Roger was immediately smitten with a young woman and confidently declared his intention to marry her by the end of the evening. The woman who caught his attention was Melissa. Born on January 1, 1960, in Wichita, Melissa grew up in a loving family of 6 siblings, although she tragically lost a younger sister in infancy. Melissa was a kind, diligent, and helpful person who always put others before herself. She started her career as a bank cashier and worked her way up the ranks, earning promotions through her dedication, teamwork, and strong work ethic. Her career was marked by success, ultimately leading to her appointment as vice president of the bank. The first meeting of Roger and Melissa marked the start of a lifelong partnership between two kindred spirits, who tied the knot in 1991. On the surface, the Blummels seemed to have it all. Melissa's rapid rise through the banking ranks, while Roger's charisma enabled him to successfully launch his own business venture. With a natural talent for bringing people together, Roger thrived on sharing good times with friends and spreading joy to those around him. In Melissa, he had found the ideal partner to share in his adventures. What's more, the couple's strong sense of social responsibility drove them to participate in and contribute to various charitable, sporting, and community-driven initiatives in their locality. The Blummel had an idyllic life, but it lacked one thing: a child to bring laughter and joy. After years of trying to conceive, they decided to adopt. A social worker introduced them to Kesha, who was putting her 2 sons, Tony and Chris, up for adoption. The Blummel wanted a closed adoption, but Kesha preferred open. In the end, the Blummel approach won, and Tony and Chris became part of their family, starting a new life. Tony was amazed by daily dinners. The kids quickly adapted, thriving in elementary school and beyond. They excelled in high school, making diverse friends and starring in sports like wrestling and football. Tony's wrestling prowess earned him 2nd place in a division competition, promising a bright future for the family. Tony's family life took a drastic turn for the worse during his senior year of high school. Until then, he had been a model child, but suddenly he became rebellious and constantly clashed with his parents, resentful that they favored his younger brother Chris. He started drinking, breaking curfews, and even smoking marijuana, causing chaos at home and making it seem like all hope was lost for him to get back on track. Tony had always dreamed of joining the United States Air Force after graduating, but his new behavior ruined his chances. In 2013, he was arrested for a violent offense, and then again for driving under the influence, which meant his records would prevent him from pursuing a career in military aviation. Tony's life spun out of control after these events, lacking direction after high school. He shunned education and jobs, preferring to sleep in and get high on cannabis. Melissa lived in fear of his violent outbursts, and there was another secret the family didn't know. Since 2013, Kesha contacted her biological sons on social media. Tony was excited to reconnect, but Chris seemed unreceptive. Kesha was devastated after giving them up, relieved they were with a good family together. Reconnecting with Tony thrilled her, but she resented the family for allegedly turning Chris against her. Moreover, when Kesha learned about Tony's troubles with his adoptive parents, she saw an opportunity to reconnect with her son and swiftly extended an invitation for him to visit her. At the adoptive home, things worsened. Tony's rage boiled over, and he punched a hole in the wall. This was the last straw. The family realized they and Chris were no longer safe. After failed attempts to address Tony's behavior, Roger and Melissa made the tough decision to ask him to leave. He started by wandering aimlessly, but he soon understood he needed to take action to support himself financially. He got jobs at fast food restaurants, and, to make some extra money, he also sold cannabis. Despite having no fixed address and sleeping at different friends' houses each night, he eventually fell in with a group of young people who were heavily into drug abuse. Among the midst of despairing events, a lifeline emerged for Tony when Kesha extended an invitation for him to move to California and live with her. Tony seized the opportunity with eagerness, and the reunion took place in September 2013 at Kesha's California residence. Accompanied by his high school best friend, Braden, who had dropped out in his junior year to pursue a life of drug dealing, he arrived filled with hope, seeking Kesha's support, who was well-versed in the drug trade, to establish a large-scale marijuana operation in the area, and even discussed entering the medical cannabis market. The reality was that they had arrived to live in a small apartment, which had only one room. It is not hard to imagine that the situation in the place began to be tense, particularly because Sean, Kesha's partner, had 2 jobs and was the only one bringing in money to cover the expenses for 5 people. Kesha only contributed a part of the social assistance she received for her daughter. Kesha, Tony, and Braden spent their days using drugs, and the woman's younger daughter was all the time under that bad influence. Sean reached a breaking point when she discovered Tony and Braden selling marijuana near her house. She told them to stop, citing the danger to her as the property owner. Then, she issued an ultimatum: get a job or leave the apartment. But instead of complying, the group banded together against her, eventually leaving for a nearby hotel for 2 weeks. However, without income, they couldn't afford the hotel bill. They didn't consider getting a decent job due to their financial struggles. Their initial plan was to head back to Kansas, possibly because Tony was familiar with the area from his drug dealings. After nearly a day of driving, they decided to stop in Arizona and spend the night at a hotel. It was during their stay that Tony shared an idea with his companions to kill his adoptive parents in order to inherit their wealth. Once they arrived in Wichita and settled into a hotel room they'd rented for a month, they focused on finalizing the details of this plan. Tony had devised a straightforward plan. He would kill Roger and Melissa, collect the insurance payout, sell off their assets, and use the proceeds to launch a more extensive drug operation. Tony was convinced that his original family would amass a fortune by growing and selling marijuana. He even pinpointed the ideal day to carry out the crime: Friday, November 15th, 2013. This date suited him perfectly, since his brother Chris would be away, attending a wrestling event related to his practice. As a former wrestling star, Tony still maintained connections with some team members, which is how he learned about his brother's commitment that evening. Tony hatched a plan to invite Roger and Melissa to a meeting under the guise of discussing their past issues and making amends. While they were out, Braden would bring Kesha to the empty residence, where she would steal valuables. Tony knew the location of a stash of emergency cash his adoptive parents kept at home. The plan was to make it look like a botched robbery. When Roger and Melissa returned, Kesha would kill them. Initially, everyone thought the plan was solid, but Braden later got cold feet and refused to participate. He did, however, agree to help by obtaining the necessary guns. As an alternative, he suggested his friend Andrew, a former high school acquaintance, who could drive Kesha to the residence and play a supporting role in the crime. Braden obtained 2 pistols from other criminals as promised. It's worth noting that there was never any plan to share the money with Andrew, who was hired to drive and provide backup for Kesha during the robbery in exchange for $11,000. Kesha would ultimately be the one carrying out the heist. In early November 2013, Kesha shared a photo on social media of herself with Tony, accompanied by a caption that read, "A bond that cannot be broken." Then, on Friday, November 15th, Tony's prediction came true. His adoptive parents agreed to meet with him, just as he had foreseen. The encounter took place peacefully. At the Blumels' house, a completely different scenario unfolded. Following Roger and Melissa's departure for the meeting, Kesha and Andrew snuck in, broke into the garage, and started searching through the house. They seized the chance to steal some small valuable items and the cash the couple kept on hand for emergencies. With the first part of their plan accomplished, Kesha and Andrew concealed themselves near the secluded residence, lying in wait for their victims to return. Tony called, saying his meeting ended and he was dropped off at the hotel. The wait was short. As the Blumel vehicle stopped, 2 attackers emerged. Kesha stood by Melissa's side. Andrew aimed at Roger. Melissa, still shocked, recognized the mother of the adopted children. She barely said, "Oh my God, Kesha," before a shot to the head made her collapse. Roger, frantic, tried to help his wife. Kesha approached, gun aimed at him, but it jammed. She tried again, Roger frozen in shock beside his wife's body. The gun finally fired, and he collapsed next to her. After the fatal plan was executed, Kesha and Andrew hastily departed in the vehicle they had arrived in. The Blumel spouses remained at the scene until approximately 9:15 p.m. when Chris returned from his meeting to find the devastating scene. He quickly called 911, reporting that he had just arrived home to find his parents semi-conscious inside their van. He described Roger as coughing and Melissa as nodding her head up and down, both with visible gunshot wounds to their heads. The dispatcher instructed him to attempt resuscitation efforts while emergency services arrived shortly thereafter to take control of the situation. Miraculously, the Blumel was still alive, their lives clinging to a fragile thread, and was swiftly rushed to a hospital. Meanwhile, back at the hotel where they were staying, Kesha appeared to suffer a panic attack, declaring that she urgently needed to take an illicit substance, which she proceeded to do, joined by the other boys. Also, at that moment, Kesha handed over the used gun and a wallet containing stolen cash and micas to be discarded in a nearby stream. Andrew disposed of the evidence in a nearby park's pond. The next day, Tony used the proceeds to start dealing marijuana, earning his first $100 profit. Tragically, on the same day, Melissa lost her battle with illness and passed away at the age of 53. Tony visited his father in the hospital, unaware that he had been previously removed from the Blumels' will and insurance policies. As it turned out, the 2 heinous crimes had been committed for nothing. In the days that followed, it emerged that Andrew had not received payment and was even unaware that Kesha had stolen cash from the Blumel family's home. Eventually, fate caught up with them. During the initial inspection of the Blumel residence, the police observed that the garage door had been forced open, and upon entering the house, they found everything in disarray, with items scattered haphazardly. It was confirmed that money, jewelry, and other valuables had been stolen. The authorities considered the possibility that the attack on the couple had been a consequence of their arrival, while the thieves were still inside. However, since the fatal assault had occurred prior to the couple's entry into the home, this initial hypothesis was soon dismissed. In the van where Roger and Melissa were attacked, no significant fingerprints were found, although investigators did discover a book casing. Then the authorities shifted their focus to the victims' workplaces, suspecting that a disgruntled client might have sought revenge. However, this theory was also ruled out, so it was time to interview people close to the couple. Tony was first on the detectives' list, as he had been the last person seen alive with the victims. But he vehemently denied any involvement, claiming he knew nothing about the incident. According to him, after finishing dinner, he had returned directly to the hotel where he was staying with his mother. The hotel staff corroborated this alibi. Next on the list was Chris, who had discovered the bodies, but he was quickly cleared after verifying that he had been at a dinner with the wrestling team at the time of the incident. However, the investigators discovered an anomaly in his behavior. He didn't appear overly distraught, instead seeming lost in thought. When police pursued this lead and questioned him about his parents' disappearance, Chris promptly replied that one person came to mind. He added that the only individual who might harbor a grudge against their parents and possibly be capable of such an act was his older brother, Tony. With this significant lead, the authorities caught a fortunate break in their hunt for the culprits. A man contacted the police, revealing that a young acquaintance of Tony's had approached him to buy a gun. The detectives homed in on this individual, and upon digging into his background, uncovered a long history of drug-related offenses. Furthermore, they discovered he had accompanied Tony on a trip to California. The suspect was none other than Braden. Shortly after, Braden received a message from his family warning him that the sheriff's office investigators were seeking to question him about the Blummel case. The morning after, Braden voluntarily went to the police station. According to a press report, on his way to the station, Braden stopped at a pond to dispose of an item, allegedly the guns used in the crime, which had not been discarded as planned. As it happened, he was already under surveillance. And when the police searched the water, they found an unused pistol in the bag he had thrown away. Braden's interrogation lasted 3 days, during which he initially denied any involvement in the incident. However, he eventually cracked under the pressure from the authorities, confessing everything he knew, revealing that the idea for the attack originated with Tony. Tony Blummel, 18, and his biological mother, Kesha, 35, were arrested on November 19, 2013, at their hotel. Andrew, also 18, was taken into custody, and Braden, another 18-year-old, was arrested the following day. Initially, Kesha denied any involvement in the robbery and other crimes, while the 3 young men confessed. On November 25, 2013, the accused made their first court appearance via video conference, facing identical charges: first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, burglary, and theft. Bail was set at $500,000 for the 3 young men and $1 million for Kesha. On December 21st, Roger's heart stopped beating, and at just 48 years old, he was reunited with his beloved Melissa. Following Roger's death, the situation for the woman and the 3 young men took a dire turn as they faced the possibility of being charged with capital murder, which carried the risk of a death penalty sentence. On January 3, 2014, the 4 detainees were formally charged with 1 count of capital murder for allegedly killing multiple people in the same incident. Kesha also faced additional charges: 2 counts of aggravated robbery, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. The preliminary hearing took place on July 17th of that same year, by which time Braden had cut a deal with authorities, agreeing to become the prosecution's star witness in exchange for leniency in his sentence. In 2015, following a year of negotiations, Braden and 2 others implicated in the crime reached agreements with the prosecution. Under these agreements, the accused parties would not contest the charges brought against them, and in return, they would relinquish their right to appeal their sentences. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to refrain from pursuing the death penalty and to dismiss certain charges. In a series of separate hearings commencing mid-2015, each of the accused parties formally confirmed their intention to plead guilty. Kesha got life in prison without parole for capital murder, plus 10 years for aggravated robbery. Her sentences will run back to back. In court, she expressed regret and respect for the victim's family, but denied involvement in the crime. She's still in a high-security prison today. Tony Blummel, known to all as Tony, received the same sentence as his mother. At the hearing, his aunt Christina read a victim impact statement, thanking authorities for justice and mentioning the love Roger and Melissa had shown Tony. Tony listened in silence, tears welling up. Christina told him he'd chosen his path, and one day he might understand the consequences of those choices. Tony's now in a correctional facility with a record of many infractions. A week later, Andrew was found guilty of first and second-degree murder, sentenced to life and 155 months. Last, Braden, who'd made a deal with prosecutors, was guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced to 242 years. His first release chance is May 28, 2035, but he's had 71 disciplinary reports for bad behavior. District Attorney satisfied with case outcome. Despite waiving appeal rights, Kesha tried and failed. Undisputed, Roger and Melissa Blummel's lives ended tragically. Kesha's excess-driven life led to tragedy, sparked by a descendant rejecting her. For his part, Tony repaid the couple's love and care with resentment, envy, and violence, opting for an unjustifiable path of substance abuse that ultimately led him to commit a double crime. As a consequence, Kesha's younger daughter was forced to grow up in a foster home. In contrast, Chris Blummel, with the support of his family, managed to overcome the ordeal and build a fulfilling life.
Massive surge going on right now at the New Hampshire home where a missing little girl's father and stepmother used to live. Harmony Montgomery vanished while in her father's custody years ago at the age of 5. Investigators may have a new lead in the Harmony Montgomery chase 3 years after the little girl was last seen. The FBI's here, so there's something or something, yeah. Hey, fans, it's gotta be the I can't do something I'm sitting on again. In December 2021, the name Harmony Montgomery first hit headlines across the United States of America when a missing persons investigation was launched to find the 7-year-old girl. Since then, her father and stepmother have both been arrested and charged. A home where she used to live in Manchester, New Hampshire, has been searched for days on end, and the reward for information leading to her discovery has topped $140,000. But here's the strange thing. Before all of this, nobody seems to have set eyes on Harmony for more than 2 years. So, who is Harmony Montgomery? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice that this little girl has gone missing? Where has she been at all this time? And is it now too late to save her life? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I want to take you guys through the story of little Harmony Montgomery, who dropped off the face of the earth back in 2019. Little Harmony wasn't born under a lucky star. Both her parents have a problematic history of substance abuse, and she had to cope with a visual disability in one eye through all of that. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, a resident of Massachusetts, lost custody due to addiction problems when her daughter was just about 4 years old. Sorey had to surrender Harmony to the state in the summer of 2018. After that, the girl's father, Adam Montgomery, secured sole custody in February 2019 and moved her to New Hampshire. Harmony was living with her father, Adam, as well as his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their children at the property at the time when she went missing. The little girl had been in and out of foster care for much of her life, according to her files. Sometimes kids do get caught up in the legal system for years at a time. But Harmony wasn't one of the kids who slipped through the cracks of the foster care system. She went missing from her own father's house, and he never reported the matter, nor tried to reach out for help, nor find his daughter. So what exactly is his involvement in the disappearance of his child? Police said they first became aware of the case when they received a call from the girl's mother, Crystal Sorey, in November 2021. She had been trying to locate her daughter for months, but said she had been blocked by her ex-husband from contacting her. She said she last saw her daughter during a FaceTime video call with Adam Montgomery around Easter 2019. Sorey told the police that since then, she unsuccessfully made attempts to find Harmony by contacting various schools and driving by addresses associated with Adam Montgomery. She said last year, he and his partner Kayla blocked all communication with her. According to news reports, Sorey had been sharing concerns over Harmony's well-being with Blair and Jonathan Miller, a couple who fostered and eventually adopted Harmony's younger brother Jameson in June 2019. The two were also actively trying to make a connection with Harmony and told Sorey multiple times they'd adopt her if the need arose. Harmony spent a lot of time in foster care with her younger biological brother Jameson. It seems that the couple, who said they repeatedly told Harmony's mother that they were willing to adopt the girl if need be, was very much interested in the hunt or the missing child. The couple actively tried to make contact with Harmony throughout the past 2 years, as they said Jameson missed her and that he'd cry at night for her. The couple said they weren't ever able to speak with Harmony and kept in touch with Sorey about her attempts to open a line of communication with the girl's father. On November 18, 2021, Sorey reported Harmony missing to the Manchester Police Department. Sorey made her first public appearance at the candlelight vigil on January 8th after authorities searched the last known residence of her daughter. "I just don't feel that in my heart," Sorey told reporters at the time. "Like, I don't feel like I lost her. And a mother knows. A mother knows if your baby's here or not. I know she's here." She had this message for her daughter. "Hi, baby. If you can see me and hear me, I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you, and I won't stop fighting until I find you, okay? You stay strong, and Mommy's right here fighting for you. I love you." Now, this is where the timeline of events starts to get confusing. And that's typically the point in any investigation when you know someone has been lying. Mrs. Sorey told police she had not been able to contact her daughter since they spoke on a video call in April 2019. After that, she said, Montgomery cut off all contact between her and her daughter. But Montgomery claimed to investigators he last saw his daughter around Thanksgiving 2019, claiming that Mrs. Sorey had picked up her from Manchester to take her to live with her. The criminal complaint says that Montgomery claimed to believe his daughter was living with his ex and did not show much emotion or reaction when officers said they were concerned whether Harmony was alive when they contacted him in December. His story was also contradicted by Kayla Montgomery's account, who said she last saw Harmony the day after Thanksgiving, when her husband said he was driving her to see Mrs. Sorey. And in some additional testimony, Adam Montgomery's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, told investigators that he had not seen Harmony or his nephew since late 2019, when she was 5 years old. Police interviews with other family members revealed Montgomery was allegedly abusive toward his daughter, including giving her a black eye, forcing her to clean the toilet with her toothbrush, and making her stand in a corner for hours as punishment. Montgomery's brother Michael Montgomery told investigators he had concerns that Adam was physically abusive to the child and was super short with her. Kevin Montgomery said he noticed Harmony had a black eye in July 2019, which his nephew confessed to causing by hitting her in the face, according to the criminal complaint. "I bashed her around this house," he said his nephew told him. Kevin said he contacted DCYF at that time, and he also noticed that his nephew subjected Harmony to other forms of abusive discipline, including scrubbing a toilet with her toothbrush and her being spanked hard on the butt. A neighbor said that it was a bad situation at the property, describing lots of people living there at different times, adults seen arguing in the street, junk left piled up in the yard, and the electricity is switched off at one point. The electricity was turned off, and they ran the generator all summer with the wiring running through the window. The neighbor said the Montgomerys were basically squatting at the home when it had fallen into foreclosure, and Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery were refusing to leave. "We didn't intermingle with them as it was a bad situation," she said. "There were lots of different people living there, piles of junk in the driveway, junk outside." She said she went away for the Thanksgiving holidays in 2019 and returned to find the family had finally packed up and moved out. And another neighbor on the street where Harmony lived also says that the family moved on Thanksgiving 2019, the same time Adam Montgomery says he last saw the missing child. Manchester police said definitively that Harmony has not been seen since around October or November 2019, when she was 5 years old. Yet, a missing persons investigation was only launched in December 2021. Mrs. Sorey has gone on public record to state that her daughter was failed by everybody. Despite multiple efforts to reach out to her daughter, or at least find out more, no authorities concerned paid attention. And the girl's father clearly couldn't care less what happened to the child. The last confirmed sighting of Harmony by law enforcement was on the 11th of September 2019, when Manchester police officers were called to the home on 77 Guildford Street in Manchester, where she lived. Police Chief Aldenburg, who is in charge of the case now, previously said the last police call-up to the property was in October 2019, but confirmed he had muddled the dates in a press briefing on the 12th of January. Despite the date change, the police chief said investigators are still working on the belief that Harmony was last seen in October or November of that year. Harmony's father and his wife were both arrested and charged on counts related to the missing child in early January. Adam Montgomery was arrested on the 4th of January and charged with second-degree felony assault, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and 1 misdemeanor count of interference with custody. On the assault charge, he is accused of striking Harmony in the face sometime in July 2019, giving her a black eye according to the criminal complaint. Officials said Montgomery is not cooperating with the investigation into his daughter's disappearance, and he has refused to say where she is. The day after her husband's arrest, Kayla Montgomery was also arrested on 1 felony charge of welfare fraud for allegedly fraudulently collecting welfare benefits for the missing children between December 2019 and June 2021. Mrs. Montgomery, who has 3 children with her husband, is accused of obtaining $1,500 in food stamp benefits meant for Harmony between December 2019 and June 2021, even though the girl was not living with them. Prosecutors have now dropped that welfare fraud charge and added 3 new charges, 1 count of theft by deception and 2 misdemeanor charges of welfare fraud. The charges accuse Mrs. Montgomery of making intentionally false statements about her stepdaughter's whereabouts in February and March 2021 to claim benefits. After the police investigation into the case amped up, several disturbing details about Harmony's father came to light. Adam Montgomery has a history of violence and a long criminal record, including convictions for shooting a man in the head in a drug deal just 6 months before Harmony was born. He was also convicted in 2010 for attacking 2 women at gunpoint. It has emerged that Montgomery is a suspect in the cold case murder of a 28-year-old man in Lynn, New Hampshire, back in February 2008. Darlin Guzman was found shot in the chest in the parking lot of the former White Hen convenience store in Lynn's Austin Square on the night of the 10th of February 2008. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. A source in Boston law enforcement told reporters that Montgomery, who was 18 at the time, and 2 members of his family, who were not named, had been the focus of the murder investigation since day 1. The 3 family members had been in contact with the victim earlier that day and planned to meet with him at the convenience store before the meeting culminated in gunfire, according to the source. The victim's car was later found abandoned in the direction of Bedford, New Hampshire, where Montgomery lived at the time. No one has ever been charged with Mr. Guzman's murder, but the source said Montgomery remains the focus of the investigation to this day. Almost 14 years on from that killing, Adam Montgomery and his wife are now charged on counts related to his missing daughter. However, while charged with serious offenses including child abuse and welfare fraud, no charges have been brought against anyone directly in connection to Harmony's disappearance. So why was Harmony not reported missing for 2 years? Mrs. Sori has accused the authorities of failing her daughter. She said she made multiple attempts to report concerns to Child Services. After November 18th, when she contacted Manchester police saying she believed her daughter was missing, someone finally paid attention. Police officers contacted the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth and Families, or DCYF, about the location of the missing child. Then, on the 27th of December, the DCYF reported that it was also unable to locate Harmony. Manchester police announced a search was launched on the 31st of December. Emails sent by Mrs. Sori to the Manchester mayor's office begging for help in finding her daughter have also now come out. "Please, I'm begging for help in finding my daughter," she wrote on the 29th of December. In her emails, Mrs. Sori said Adam Montgomery had never enrolled their daughter in school and that she has missed important doctor's appointments she's had since a baby due to a disability in her eye. The emails were sent just 2 days before police finally reported Harmony missing. As well as the repeated attempts to raise the alarm, the family was well known to Child Services. Newly released records released on the 12th of January have emerged showing that police officers were called to the Guilford Street home at least 10 times between February 2019, when Montgomery got custody of Harmony, and when she was last seen in the fall. Reports ranged from claims of domestic disturbances to animal welfare and concerns about the living conditions in the home. The DCYF was notified about some of the incidents. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu announced on the 12th of January that the DCYF is carrying out an internal review of its handling of Harmony's case. However, the governor defended the state's work, saying, "As soon as we found out that this child may not have been showing up for school for quite some time, it was reported up to us. The team got right on it. It wasn't a delay. It didn't sit in a file on somebody's desk." An independent investigation is also being carried out by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate after Harmony was moved from Massachusetts into the custody of her father in New Hampshire in February 2019. Now, officials in New Hampshire and Massachusetts are passing the blame between each other. The New Hampshire governor sent a letter to Massachusetts court officials slamming a judge for placing Harmony in the care of her monster father, giving his violent past and long rap sheet. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker responded to the criticism by saying he felt his pain, but said he wants to wait and see the results of the independent review by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. Investigators have revealed very few details about what they think may have happened to Harmony. The Guilford Street property has been the focus of much of the search, with investigators seen in the home and the backyard for multiple days. However, Manchester police said the search had concluded there. It is not clear if anything of interest was uncovered, and no other locations where searches have been identified. Chief Aldenburg insisted on the 12th of January, but they are still working on the belief that Harmony is alive. However, he admitted that he was a little discouraged by the case so far and pleaded with the public to come forward with information. He added, "Somebody out there knows something." Despite the national attention and the painstaking efforts to find the missing child, investigators appear to have made very little headway. Though concerning, the lack of progress is perhaps unsurprising, as whoever has information about what happened to the little girl has had a more than a 2-year head start on the investigators. On the 14th of June 2022, law enforcement officials were seen transporting a refrigerator and taking potential pieces of evidence from the scene at a Manchester home where Harmony Montgomery's father and stepmother, Adam and Kayla, once lived. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer stated that bringing in the refrigerator is usually used to maintain biological evidence. If they found a body or body parts in a freeze, law enforcement would want to maintain the level of decomposition. Coffindaffer said, "I have a really creepy feeling about this. It's not good." Several law enforcement agencies were seen outside the Union Street apartment complex, where investigators were focused on the second-floor unit, where Montgomery's father, Adam Montgomery, and his now estranged wife, Caleb, once lived. A woman called Darcy Hambleton, who lives behind the apartment complex, told a reporter that she briefly saw police enter the building on Monday, and it seemed casual. But by 9 a.m. Tuesday, Hamilton said she saw a full-scale investigation from her balcony, which included 6 to 7 officers behind the building at any given time. She added that she saw an individual in an FBI t-shirt and one man in a hazmat suit, and noted that the front of the complex is a media circus. Investigators were later seen taking a refrigerator wrapped in biohazard tape from the apartment and loading it into a truck. A camera was also used to search the sewer in front of the building. I knew about the case since 2021 when Harmony was initially reported missing. It's all over Manchester on signs and billboards, Hamilton said. But I had no idea that her father had lived behind me. Noting that she has a 7-year-old daughter herself, Hamilton added that her heart is in my stomach right now, thinking that something could have happened to that little girl here. After this raid, Crystal Sorey stated publicly, "I know in my heart this is no longer a rescue mission. They're looking for a body." In a disturbing follow-up, Kelsey Small, one-time girlfriend of the father of missing Harmony Montgomery, was recently found dead in Manchester, police said. Small, 27, was with Adam Montgomery when police found the homeless couple sleeping in a car on December 31, 2021, in the early days of the search for Harmony. The cause of death is still pending, but it does not appear suspicious, said police spokeswoman Heather Hamill. According to court records, police were on their 4th day of searching for Harmony when they found Adam Montgomery and Small sleeping in a car on New Year's Eve. The car was parked on Harvell Street on the west side, close to the Gifford Street home where the Montgomery family had lived 2 years earlier. Small told police she had been romantically involved with Adam Montgomery for more than a year. She knew he had 4 children from previous relationships, but he was not in touch with any of them and never talked about Harmony, she told police. She had no idea where Harmony might be. Police eventually arrested Adam Montgomery, but never charged Small with any crime. So what happened to Harmony Montgomery, and where is she now? If her father is innocent, why did he never report her disappearance? And when her mother, Crystal, tried to find her daughter, why weren't police and the local child protective services on her side? As this case unfolds, we hope that Harmony's mother finds the justice she deserves, whether her daughter is dead or living. Police have stated that Harmony is 8, and she should be wearing glasses due to her blindness in one eye. It's a heartbreaking story, and we hope with everything we've got that somehow, against all odds, Harmony Montgomery might still be found alive.